Go, one, two, three. Hello, one, two, three. Check one, two, three. Hello, one, two, three. Holy cow. Hello, one, two, three. Ooh, buddy. Hello, one, two, three. Mic check one, two, three.
I am. I'm on. Can you hear me? Hi, how are you? I'm doing good. I'm doing pretty good.
Okay, you are sitting. I hear you. How did you do that? What magic did you work?
Call the meeting, this workshop of Sweetwater County School District Number 1, Board of Trustees to order. We have some people attending by virtually, so I am going to do a roll call. Okay, let's see, Mr. Mickelson,
I am here.
Mr. Jackman,
Here.
Mrs. Summers. Here. Let's see, Mr. Batolo. Mr. Batolo. Mrs. Thompson. Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Reedy.
Here.
Mrs. Jellicoe, present. So we have 5 members in attendance. Okay, Most of us know Mr. Kessler, Rod Kessler from the Wyoming School Boards Association. Andrea, this is your first official workshop. Welcome to your first official workshop. And Mr. Kessler, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always good to be back in Sweetwater County. I've had the opportunity to spend the weekend here. I took pictures and sent them back to my kids. And they said, oh, yeah, that's where we were born. That's where you were born. That's the river we used to fish in. Yeah, that's the river we used to fish in. So it's nice to be back in Sweetwater County and to be working with you. For the board members that are at home, I'm going to try really hard tonight to make sure I ask you questions. So if I don't, you make sure you chime in. Kind of crazy times right now in Wyoming and being in education. And I've been traveling around the state, some virtual meetings, and some of our meetings, of course, face-to-face. And tonight we're going to have a combination of that. So if you hang with us, we're going to try to get through. What I'm hoping to do tonight is to review some of the best practices that are out there that people say effective boards use. And Andrea, a lot of that's for you as the new board member, but it's also a good review for board members that are in the positions they've been in to go back and see how they're doing. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that you're working on in your district in relationship to your roles and responsibilities as board members. And I can see you've done a lot of work in the last year or two. You guys have really done quite a bit as a board and as a district. And then just to look at some possibilities for the future. This is kind of a meeting where we're gonna work through some issues, talk about some things, and maybe plan for the future a little bit. And then down the road, we can come back together and work again and work together and try to find answers for the issues that are out there. Because I believe you have a few out there as a school board in the state of Wyoming and in this country right now. One of the things that you guys have noticed and I've seen as I've traveled and talked to superintendents and school board members, I don't believe I've ever seen in my 60-some years of public schools in such a difficult time. And I know the whole COVID piece has added a big thick layer on top of everything else you get to deal with. And one of the concerns and things that I hear over and over is, there's a lot of uncertainty about, what's right, what's wrong. And what I try to remind people is all you can really do is your very best. All you can do is take the expertise that you get from the people that guide and give you the information. And then as board members and district personnel, you try to carry out those plans the very best you can. And at the end of the day, we're here to educate kids in light of all the challenges that you're facing right now. And you're not alone. Like I said, there's 48 districts in the state, and I think I've worked with like 25, 26 of them here in the last year. And the burdens and the issues you're dealing with are the same ones that are happening everywhere else. My concern, just as a citizen that I have, is other than our safety, of course, which is very important. I worry about the stress level of those frontline workers, our employees that are in the classrooms, and our cooks and our bus drivers and our secretaries and those teachers. And I know you as board members worry about that as well. And of course, those parents that have had to make all these adjustments in this world. I don't think it's been easy for anyone. So what I'm going to try to do tonight is give you some ideas and share some best practices and maybe some think abouts. And hopefully at the end of the night, you can take one or two things with you that you can use here in Sweetwater 1 that might help you as an effective district leadership team, which is the board administration working together. And so that's kind of the goal, to bounce some ideas off you tonight, have you share some of the things you've been working on. And we're going to take you through the PowerPoint and pull and stop and jump around a little bit, because that's what Rod does, like to jump around a little bit. I'd like to start with just real quick introductions so that I know everybody. I know a lot of you, Andrea, I just met tonight, but if you'd share a little bit about who you are, how long you've been on the board, and other jobs you might do beyond your role as a board member or other interests you might have. And then the question I want you to think about, instead of specifically just the broad term of COVID, what would you consider one of your greatest concerns or major issues you're thinking about as a board member in your role for the next year, next 2 years, or whatever the term is you have left? What is one thing that's kind of on the back of your mind that says, this is something I want to make sure I know more about, get my arms wrapped around it, and do what I can to go after it? So with that, I'm going to turn it back over. I think we can start, if we would, with our virtual guest first.
Sure.
If we could go ahead and Max wants to go first. Max, are you ready to
Thank you.
share a little bit?
Sure. I don't have a lot to say. This is my third term on the board, and one that came about because of the challenges that education is facing. I felt like looking at all of the incumbents, if we decided not to run, you would have a board comprised of new people having to deal with extremely difficult choices and subjects. Just a second, baby. And I know between COVID and the budget and the transition to the 4-day week, our district is in a really tumultuous time, and that can be good. It can be a great catalyst for growth and change, and it can be a hot mess express. So my hope is that I can be a part of making it good. And my big concern is really beyond the immediate budget issues and the COVID issues and those things, and is more about how do we adjust the public conversation and perception around public education, that educators are not actually control freaks bent on making us a communist dictatorship, and that they do good work and should be supported, and how we make that shift is what I'm really focused on. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Max. That's amazing. George?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, George.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Yes,
Um,
George.
Okay, going 3 years, on my third year for my first term. I not real familiar. This is not really new because we made other budget cuts, but this is the most extreme. So with COVID and the budget cuts, I worry about more so how our staff and our students and parents are handling it. How many do we have that are putting up that front that aren't saying, hey, I have some concerns, or I have some issues, or I just need to talk to somebody. And I know that our staff has gone above and beyond from Kelly clean on down. They've been working day and night. And I mean that literally. They've been working 16, 18-hour days, and I know they have. And I worry about them. When do they, when are they going to get a break to be able to take a breath and say, hey, everybody just needs to relax. And I think right now everybody's in the mode of trying to provide the best education we can for our students and to do the best job they can with what they have to work with at the moment. And we've gone way above as far as the virtual in classroom versus virtual classroom, all of that. And I think we've set an example for others, I'm sure. And I worry about how long it's going to take for those people to burn out. Yeah, we get a break here, we get a break there with the holidays and stuff, but when are they going to get a break to decompress and be able to do something other than work?
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, George. Those great comments. And for those of you that are in the room,
Well,
Matt, would you like to go ahead and go first?
Sure, thanks, Rod. Matt Jackman. This will be my third year on the board. I own Jackman Construction. We do construction, surprisingly. Let's see, something about me. I have 24 more days of being a national candidate soccer referee, and then I retire or don't move up anymore. I think my biggest concern right now, it's going to be that 4-day week calendar. Seeing those calendars come in, those are interesting to see. A 6-week summer is a little nerve-wracking. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Carol or Andrea, who'd like to go next?
Go go ahead.
So I'm Andrea Summers and I'm the freshman on the board. And I work for the state, for the Department of Environmental Quality as my regular day job. And then we have, we raise animals up in Farson. So I've got a flock of sheep and a whole herd of rabbits and some of that other things that I spend doing in my off time. I have recently begun making cheese, and that's like my new favorite hobby.
Awesome.
So I think one of the things that I'd really like to learn more about and wrap my head around is staff and teacher retention. What does retention or not retaining our staff, what does it cost our district? How do we improve our retention of our staff and teachers? We know that high quality teachers are, like the number one indicator of student success. And if we lose them, how we know that it hurts our students. So, especially with COVID, I think, as George said, I really think that our staff and our teachers are, our administrators and our teachers and even our bus drivers and our custodians, I think they're all struggling to keep up. And I really worry about what happens when we're not able to retain those highly qualified individuals. So.
Okay, thank you.
Carol Jellicoe, I am retired since 2016. I've just been reelected to the second term on the board. I have to concur with George and Andrea, with almost everybody. I'm concerned about how our employees have all stepped up. They've all gone the extra mile, and I'm worried about mental health. You can only go at that rate for so long, and though we try to recognize and acknowledge the effort, the extra effort everybody's doing, it pales in what they deserve. And financially, we're not able to do a whole lot either. So, we are looking at ways that maybe we can try to give them some time, because that seems to be what's lacking. They need time to do grades. They need time. It's just time. So hopefully that is my concern, and how we can best address some of those time elements, and give them some time to,
Awesome.
decompress. Hopefully, one of the things we talked about is at the end of the semester, time to get their grades in. So when the day is over, they actually have a Christmas break, and that they can get some relaxed time.
Okay.
So hopefully some of those things are going to come to fruition.
And Kelly, you get to go last. How's that?
Okay. Let me know, Max and George, if you can't hear me, I'll move the microphone over if you can.
Coming through loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Let me know if I'm too loud. Let me know if I need to back up.
Nope, you're fine.
Okay, thank you, George. I am very proud of Sweetwater One and the way that they have maneuvered through the challenges that we have. I truly am, and the effort from everyone of what this has taken to make this work. It is enormous, and it continues to be. I think probably one of the greatest ways that I see change and the way to work through it is the communication piece. And I think I'm really, again, proud of our staff and the way that they have communicated and involving people in this big dynamic that
we don't know when the light at the end of the tunnel is going to come. And, you know, we're facing probably, I always tell our administrative team that this is going to be the biggest challenge, I believe, of their career. And between COVID and the budget, it is so big, without a doubt. But we have made it almost halfway through the year, and that is a huge accomplishment, because what that takes on a day-to-day basis to make that happen is so enormous that I don't think people understand what that looks like on a daily basis. I really don't.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, it's pretty evident that all of you have recognized, and as leaders in this district, at the end of the day, you get to control what you get to control. And I heard some things that you shared that I think are pretty interesting and very important. And the communication one is one that's we're gonna talk about a little bit tonight. More effective ways, how can we improve what we're doing? How do you get the checks and balances put in play? You know, Carol talking about what I've heard all across the state is I've been really concerned about the stress level that people face. And most folks in the helping profession, education profession, like your healthcare workers and everyone else, they just want to do their job. But the added COVID on top of it is really set some limitations that maybe we don't even know what those all are yet. And I think that whole world of unknown, I see that as causing so much stress in the individual. I know as a human being, it causes stress in me, knowing about is it safe for me to do this? Is it safe for me to do that? You know, when will this end? And I, like anyone else, you worry about your extended family, your elders, you worry about your grandkids. And then when you work in a school setting or any other business-like setting, you worry about your employees, you worry about your customers, those that you serve. And so hopefully what we can talk about and kind of work toward is, what do you have control over and what don't you have control over? And I heard words like budget, which I, you know, remember doing that for a lot of years as I worked 30 some years and most of it in the state of Wyoming and in leadership. And budget is always a challenge, and it's going to be tougher possibly in the next few years, depending on what the legislature does or does not do that helps schools out. The whole issue with COVID. You know, one of the themes that I keep hearing from people in general when I talk to them is this: they want quality leadership. They want someone to help them feel like there's an end in sight. I know we all probably feel that way about the COVID piece, but when it comes to education, you guys are the ones that get to make the decisions. And I think probably what I heard from you guys tonight was simply this: how you choose to unpack that and gather that information and learn about the issues that people are dealing with, and how you choose to help solve those problems or give them the resources or the time, as Carol talked about. How you go about doing those things are things you do control. And they may not seem like you have a lot of control, but I think as we dialogue and work through it and you really break pieces down, I think there are some things that we can do as leaders in an organization that can help our troops, if you will, the people on the front lines, know that you're there with them, that you understand what's happening, and that you're trying to do everything you can to support and move them forward. Not that you haven't. I know you have. But are there things we can do from a leadership standpoint that would allow us to make sure that that transparency is there? And one of the buzzwords that's out there is, you know, people want to be trusting of their leadership. They want to know that what leadership's doing is for the betterment of the cause they're working at. And that's what you guys have been working on for years that I've known you. You've done a very good job of that. But can you get better and keep working on it? Absolutely. Do you have new challenges in front of you that you didn't face before? Absolutely. It's overwhelming almost. So I think all the things you've shared, first of all, thank you for sharing those. Those are heartfelt and they're real. How do we go about, what are some of the things that other people are doing out there that might help, that might shine a light on, we might learn something from, or we might want to challenge ourselves in those arenas? Those are some of the things I kind of like to share with you tonight and throw at you as we go through. So with that, I think we're going to have a slide presentation here. And you guys bring that up for me? By the way, your technical support here is second to none. I would like to take these guys on the road with me if I could, because they're pretty amazing.
We know that.
Yeah, so thanks, guys, back there for all the hard work you do. One of the things that I know you guys are probably tired of talking about, but I find it interesting as I go around and I listen to different boards. One of the things I like to do is just hit real quickly on the 2020 year. I mean, where there's a lot of jokes, but there's a lot of sleepless nights that go along with this year for a lot of us in a lot of different ways. And one of the things is you're dealing with a pandemic that is, you're trying to operate educational system within a society that's dealing with a pandemic, and it impacts every end. Everything touches everything. Nobody really escapes this. Whether you're a believer that, it's from a political standpoint, if you're on the right or the left, it doesn't make any difference. What people know is it's there and that we're dealing with it. And as a school board, you were put in a place this summer, I know, talking to Kelly and many of the superintendents and board members from across the state, you put together what's called a Smart Start plan. Is that the correct term?
Mhm.
And so these are just some questions that have come up as I've visited with different boards, and we're not going to have to answer all these, but I'd like to go through a couple of them, just see what your responses are to them and what you think. My understanding is that you probably do updates on a daily basis, weekly basis. Kelly, how do you guys communicate what's going on with COVID to your staff, to board members, to the community? How does that happen now?
If it's confirmed positive cases, at the beginning, it was much more frequent. What we experienced is really COVID fatigue, without a doubt. So what we do as far as sharing the information on positive cases, we try to do that once a week at the end of the week. So we give a
Okay.
synopsis of here's where they occurred, so people know.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll just throw a couple of questions up here. And other board members and those on the virtual, if you want to address any of those in particular, let me know. But there are a couple on there. One of the questions that I would ask is question number 4. How well versed is the board, administration, staff, community, and students about your Smart Start plan? Knowing that I believe the plans have been adjusted and they kind of change as you go with new information and things that happen. How do you feel the general stakeholder group and the people in-house, how familiar are people with what that plan's all about? Anybody can answer that question. This is a dialogue.
I think district members know it pretty well. Anybody within the district, or your teachers, your principals. I would say your community is somewhat more ignorant of the plan in general.
Yeah.
I bet 90% of people outside the district would know the difference between tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or what it
Right.
means.
And
Do
yeah.
you see that?
What I see is people are just happy to be in person and don't want to go anyplace else.
Right.
I mean,
Because I'm not seeing that.
I mean,
But you
they,
might be,
I think they may not know it by tiers, but they know in person, they know that the virtual is not where they want to go. I mean,
Right.
for the general people, there are exceptions, and there are people that have chosen to be virtual, and they have their reasons for doing so,
Yeah,
and rightfully
absolutely.
so. But I think most people are just thankful to have the in-person. And I know a lot of the businesses have expressed that as well, that they're happy to have the in-person because that takes the pressure off of their employees so they can go to work.
Right.
So.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think in some ways, about like specifics of the plan, the community, I think there are some, who choose for some reason or another to kind of be ignorant of the plan. Like, I think the information is out there. I think a lot of people don't seek that information out. And then, one of the things I would say is that sometimes the most ignorant are the loudest voices in the community. So the people that really don't know what's going on, and they don't know about the mask requirement for schools or whatnot, those are the loudest voices in the community. And unfortunately, I think there's some spread of false information.
Okay. Well, and here's the thing, not just in the school setting, but we talked about everything touches everything with this, right? So you have state health, county health, but most of the businesses have guidelines and procedures they have to follow to some level, and they are. And I don't know that there's one perfect plan out there. That's that part about the unknown, about what really can you control with this. And I guess all I can tell you is simply from what I've learned by listening to other school boards in other districts is simply this. You can only control and share the information that you know and that you have. How you choose to unpack that information and share that information is entirely up to you. And you're right, people have to choose to either want to learn or not learn that. So when I have the question that I had up there, can I have that slide back up, please?
Rod, and if I may, I think some people have a hard time understanding that the rules for the schools are different
Right.
than the general rules out
Right.
there.
Right.
And so that we're operating under different rules. So I think that's something that we need to communicate as well, which
Sure.
we've tried to do, but sometimes people hear what they want to hear.
Well, I remember from my background as an educator, I taught in the elementary and did some counseling and principalships and those kind of things. And what I remember is sometimes in my own mind, I thought that maybe I was being redundant when I repeated things. But sometimes repeating things over and over allows people the opportunity, but you don't want to offend people. But then at the same time, you don't want to not have enough information out there for people to understand. I looked at your guys' website yesterday, and I think you guys have done an absolutely marvelous job. I don't know who all the players are that have to deal with that, but there's quite a bit of information there. And so just to encourage people to use like your website. And I would imagine at the building levels, your building principals and the leadership teams that are in those sites have probably reached out and done quite a bit above and beyond what happens at the board level or what happens at the central office. I know that the schools are reaching out and sharing information. So it's like you can never really know enough, I guess. And so encouraging people to share that information and to revisit it, I think is important because what you have there is good information.
If I could really quickly, I absolutely just wanted to be like preach when Andrea was talking, because the district has done such an outstanding job of putting information out and even being responsive to sort of the rumor mill on social media. This weekend being a perfect example, there was a rumor floating around because my kid told me, and I have 2 kids and I love them, but if they come to me and they tell me this is happening, I always verify with, an adult.
Yeah.
But that does not happen. And within, it hadn't even been an hour, the district, I'm sure Kelly had issued hey guys, this isn't true, relax. If we're going virtual, you're going to hear it from me, not from your kid. And it really is in this day and age, the district has done such a beautiful job of adapting to needing to do that instant ongoing communication, even though I know how exhausting that is. And so they're killing it.
Yeah, thanks, Max. That's very true. You guys have done an excellent job with that. If I can have that slide back up again, please. You can see there's numerous questions, but the whole point of this is I think it's important for you as a board and a leadership team to revisit these kind of things. I know you do it, and I know it could sound like overkill, but I really think revisiting some of these kind of questions and just checks and balances is really all that it is. And I think sometimes the citizen wants to know that the checks and balances are in place, that people are doing that, and I know it becomes very cumbersome. But for example, Max hit a good point. I'm looking at, number 8, I write there, what is your stump speech? And that's probably not the right term, but you get approached a lot about your plan. And so the point being this, as a school district, you have a plan that you follow, whether it's about masks or positive cases. There's people out there with religious views and political views from every end of the spectrum that you can imagine. There's differences in other states. There's differences maybe to some degree in other school districts of how they manage things. So as a board, being as informed as you can is really critical so that the information that you, or the questions that you get, you can answer it as honestly and best as you can. And if you don't know it, be honest, I don't know it, but I have a resource or 2 that I can share with you. I don't think anything's changed in this, but here's what it was that I remember. So sharing this information, regardless of the point of views that people have, you don't get to control what other people think or what their opinions are, but what you do get to control is how you choose to unpack and share the information that you have. And I know it's hard to do that sometimes when you've done it over and over and over, but my encouragement is what I've seen around the state and from other districts. I have a son that teaches in Billings, Montana, and my daughter-in-law, and they teach virtually from home right now because they have like about 20% of their population that's virtual and like 80% that's in school, as districts all across the country have adjusted and done kind of what their community needs are. Some states, everybody's face-to-face. Some states, they haven't even gone back to the classrooms yet. And so I don't know that any one of those is right. I think you have to do what's right for you and for your community. But the key being, there are a lot of differences of opinions on this. It's very politically charged. It's very emotionally charged. And we're talking about things we don't have 100% understanding of. I mean, some people maybe do, but they're a lot smarter than me. I don't. I have a lot of questions about it. And I'm not on one end or the other. I'm on the cautious end. I'm on the one that I want to make sure I stay informed. And if I'm on a school board or a superintendent, I want to make sure that the message we send out is unified and that we understand what we understand. And if you don't, get the resources and share them. And I want to say kudos to your district because I think you've done absolutely a marvelous job from what I've observed. I'm just a citizen. I logged in, I took a look, I asked a few questions here and there, and I think you're doing a lot of really good things. And I think that's what's happening across the country in a lot of places. Most places are trying to do the right things to educate their kids. And this is just an extra burden that's added to the educational setting. This morning, I sat in on a virtual conference that the state Department of Education gave. And I started jotting down the things they were talking about. And in no way is this a negative comment on my part, but it's just the overwhelming amount of information that is coming out to your school districts, probably on a weekly basis. Kelly, do you get a report like that about once a week or once every 2 weeks from the department?
We do.
So this morning, there was a state health gal there. There was some experts in education. I just want to share some of the topics that as I was listening to them today, I thought to myself, wow, on top of everything else, everybody's got to do their job, don't get me wrong. But here's some of the things that they talked about this morning. Obviously, COVID was the main issue, and there was some updating reporting and some changes that are potentially coming down the pipe. The governor just put out a call about group gatherings, and the number's going to be reduced. I don't know if you've seen that news flash yet, but I got that on my phone a little while ago. But they talked briefly about that this morning. I think school districts you don't have exactly, like Carol, I think you mentioned, not all agencies or all businesses or types of agencies have exactly the same guidelines. There are some adjustments for certain things, so knowing those is important. But they talked about reducing the size of groups meeting. They talked about, I think the term is the contact tracing and how long people are quarantined or not quarantined. It used to be 14 days. Well, if some of this information gets out there, people are going to be confused by it. And so having clarity on your end would make a huge difference to your staff, because they were talking about 2 different options, I believe. One was like a 10-day instead of the 14-day, but then you have to get a test or something in addition to it. There was another option on top of that. So there are different things happening every day in the healthcare scene that impacts how you do business in your schools. And so as a common citizen, if I'm listening to that on the news or I see it through social media or whatever, as Max was mentioning, people are going to make comments about those things. And I don't think anybody can be perfect, but I think you stay on top of that. So what else did they talk about? They talked about Chapter 21, alternative schedules. Obviously, with the virtual learning and all the things that are going on and the unknowns, scheduling is one of those things that you're required to make sure the state approves. So if you change your scheduling and those kind of things, that has to be addressed. They talked about emergency rules, Chapter 3, talked about accountability changes. They talked about different types of assessments that are going on. And I believe you're still going to do your yearly assessments this spring. Is that correct, Kelly? That's still on? For the statewide YTOP or whatever the tests are. You're still doing that this spring? Is that correct or not?
That was one of their topics.
That was one of their
I
topics.
think they were
So
talking
they're
about.
talking about what they're going to do with testing, how, is it going to be the same? You're going to do very best, get as many kids in as you can. They talked about NAEP testing, which was the national test. And in fact, that's going to get postponed because across the country. They talked about funding, CARES funding, which I believe is the relief dollars that are coming out and where those dollars are. And then there are timelines and not only timelines, but protocols that you have to follow pretty tight to make sure that you can get the money and have to spend the money by a certain date. They talked about governor relief funds. They talked about special education dollars and timelines for dollars for school districts and set aside funds. They talked about Smart Start plans and the fact that if you're making changes and adjustments and those things, the checks and balances you got to keep them in the loop at the state level. And then they were talking, of course, about virtual and some other assessment things that were going on. So I'm writing all this stuff down as I'm preparing to think about what I'm going to come and share with you. And I kind of take my PowerPoint. I felt like throwing it away but I went back. So what is important? What's not important? That is a lot of stuff that school districts have to deal with, whether it's directly Kelly or the staff members here, but indirectly as board members, you get to deal with those things too, because some of those things have to be approved by you or through a process that you go through. So all of those things in one morning. And I thought to myself, man, no wonder the stress levels are so high among the players. So from my point of view, enough complaining about the stress levels. So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to work on it? What are we going to do to be good leaders? What are we going to do to stay on top of things? So back to our slides. And again, I just encourage that this is one you look at. A couple of you mentioned this earlier, model, communicate, model, communicate. I can't give any other better advice than that based on what I've observed around the state. And kudos one more time to you folks for the work you have done and that you'll continue to do. Well, today's learning was going to be about this, but we're going to try to work into it a little bit. And you've started this for me already. As a new board member, Andrea, and veteran board members, what are 3 things you want to know more about in relation to your role as a board member? So let's just pick one thing for right now. And this is beyond the worry about budget and the worry about COVID. What is one other thing you would like to know more about your role or improve yourself on as a board member? What's one thing you want to know more about? And I'll open it up for you to share if you're comfortable sharing that. One thing you'd like to know more about in relationship to your role as a board member.
I have to say for me, coming, from Farson, the sub-district, I want to learn more about how to better be a conduit of information, to the board from the community in Farson and back to the community in Farson. And, how do we make the Farson Advisory Board work better? How, kind of what is my role in that? Because, that sharing of information and making sure that that community is tied more closely to the district so that their needs are expressed and so that they feel like their community needs are being heard and hopefully, met at some level.
Okay, and that's an important role for you. That's probably why you got elected, because people wanted you to be that great communicator and to share those responsibilities back and forth. The go-between, if you will, the leader to take the information back, make sure things get represented here, and vice versa. And that will be a challenge for you, but you'll be fine with that. You have a good crew to work with, and again, it's one of those that you'll learn as you go. And I would really encourage you to ask lots of questions. And I know Kelly's one that's really good about meeting with people one-on-one if needed. So those things you need to take advantage of. Other board members that you work with, take advantage of them. And there's board members throughout the state that deal with the very same thing you're talking about. I represented a district that had basically two communities. We had KC community and Buffalo community. And those dialogues were really important. I see it in a lot of different districts in the state that have satellite or multiple locations. And so that communication is really very critical. In fact, one of you guys mentioned tonight, communication is really one of the keys we want to work on. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you. Other board members, something else you'd want to learn more about or interested in relationship to your role as a board member?
For me, I'd like to learn a little more how other districts classify their expenses for the role of treasurer. and their staff and everything else. For example, at our cab, we have most of our tech crew is classified as tech staff.
Can you repeat that for me, Matt? I didn't quite hear what you said, sorry.
Which part?
You were talking, yeah, there we go.
There
Would you
we go.
repeat it for me one more time? I just didn't quite hear it, sorry.
No, just learning more how other districts classify expenses and roles throughout the districts. Because I know it's tough when you're comparing budgets from one district to another to see where you're spending more or less,
Okay,
and they're not all
okay,
apples to apples.
got it. Learning about budget and how it breaks out elsewhere. Okay, good. Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. Well, those are a couple of good ones. The comparison part about budget, we can find information for that. And the communication and being the conduit piece between, that's a critical one. There's a lot of folks out there that go through the very same thing. So the second question that I have on this slide, thank you guys, is how are we doing as a district leadership team? And this is for Andrea being brand new. Probably in about 2 or 3 months, Andrea will be able to answer this question a little bit better than she can tonight because she's new. But for you veteran board members that have been here and been on the board for a little while, if just to answer the question generically, if we're to say, well, how are you doing as a district leadership team? What would you share? What are you comfortable sharing?
I would say that we have adopted the leadership governance policy. And so we are in the process of each month evaluating a portion of that. And I think, we've tried to look at our role as the board as we're evaluating that, not as the district, but as what the board's role is in
Okay.
that. And I think we've done better in some areas than others.
Okay.
But I think we're open to improving. And I think that's what the whole process is about.
Yeah. That self-improvement, continuous learning piece that
Mhm.
we have
Reflective.
read about, that continuous learning, it applies to leadership teams as well. I don't know that you ever arrive. The journey is what it's all about. And so you're trying to continue to improve. And we're going to talk a little bit more tonight about your board governance piece. We have that as a handout that we're going to take a look at. So that I'm glad to see that that's an area you guys are spending some time on and working towards. So
Just the reflective piece of looking back, and we've tried to, we're not taking it in any particular order. We kind of look at what, for example, Monday night, we're going to assess board orientation and some
Okay.
things like that. So we're trying to make it applicable to kind of the timing of what's going on in the district.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we've looked at.
So the importance of that, that whole concept of the board governance piece is simply this. There's been research done and many states have adopted different ways for boards and administrative and school board teams to work together. And the research says, that if you can really focus and fine tune and you use the term reflect and go back and reference how things are going or not going and checking on it. It's like the old thing, people used to put together these elaborate board goals and how they're going to do business. And then they put it on a piece of paper and it goes on the shelf. And they don't revisit it and they don't spend time. Now they may be doing it all. I don't know, but how would you know? And so the fact that you're looking at it in a monthly type thing makes a lot of sense to me, that you're showing that it's of value to you and that you're going to go spend some time on it. And we're going to go and take a look at that in a little bit later this evening, talk a little more about how that could be done. Kelly.
Oh, I was just wondering if one of our trustees at home was.
Oh, Max or George, did you guys have a comment on that?
I did.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. We've come a very far away from where we were from my first term on the board. And it's been the best part of an otherwise fairly unpleasant experience to develop that trust and mutual respect and to find those common goals that we're all working for has really made my time on the board worthwhile.
Awesome.
And so I'm so encouraged that we're in that place.
Awesome, Max. Thanks for sharing. I don't know the last time I was here if I shared this story with you on my career. I've served on boards like the Sheridan College Advisory Board and a BOCES board. I did that for about 16 years. And so like I understand kind of the board member's role and how that's different from being the superintendent or being the president of the college. It's a different role. And I remember when I was the superintendent, about my third or fourth year, our board undertook the training for board governance leadership. And after this happened, several years after, we could look back and kind of laugh about it, but I had a couple of board members and myself, we were really leery about moving in that direction. As a superintendent, I thought I was going to lose authority and power of, being the CEO of the organization. And I had a couple of board members who really thought that they were going to lose control of, being the board and running the school district and representing the citizens. And we were both wrong. Our experiences, both for those board members and for myself as the CEO of the district, what we learned was, and what you hopefully are going to learn, and Max really did a nice job of just sharing that, I think it helps you find purpose for what it is you're supposed to be doing. And depending on the type of evidence that you can use to validate that, and depending on how, and I use this word transparency and unpacking, how you share that information and how you choose to use that information, I think will show great differences down the road. I was lucky enough to be a part of a really good school board team that valued it and used it like you guys are attempting to, and you're brand new to it. Give it some time. That's all I can give advice on, is give it some time and allow it to do its job. And I think if you give it your best shot, I think you'll learn that you can pull a lot of value from that. And I think you can improve your leadership qualities as a district leadership team. I do believe it makes a difference. So Max, thanks for sharing that. One of the questions that you will do a better job of in the future, and I know you're going through the process now, because you adopted the policy board governance leadership in 2019 in December, about a year ago. Is that correct?
Actually, it was later than that.
Yeah.
We didn't quite get it done. It was more like March, wasn't it?
Was that?
Was that
I
late?
just looked,
I thought it
I'll
was-
show you the document that you
Yeah, it
have in
was-
a bit,
yeah.
but
I was thinking it was a little bit later before we actually started implementing it. Because we were kind of waiting to go through policy, and then we just ended up kind of started using it
Bringing
because
it.
it never really did get through policy.
could I have you put that slide back up, please? So the question that I'm going to ask you, and you're going to have some good information for this, but just, it's going to grow and get better as you go through this. And Andrea, I just want to share this with you. As a new board member, you don't have to know everything by the next board meeting, okay? And I think all these other board members can attest that there's a lot to learn no matter how long you've been on the board. And for Kelly, the learning just never stops for any of you. So please don't ever feel like you're way behind, you don't know all this stuff, because you're not supposed to know it all yet. You're supposed to be learning as you go. So take a little relief in that, I hope. Question number 3 talks about, what evidence do we have that we are doing our job well? And some of the examples that districts have used in the past would be strategic plans, district goals, your communication channels that you have, all the data that you collect, your self-evaluations. And if I understand correctly, when we get to that, you're doing self-evaluations as an individual board member or as a whole board or both?
We're doing it individually, and then we have a discussion
Okay,
at the board meeting and kind of come to, kind of a consensus. We reveal what we figure is our average score for that category,
Got it.
why we feel that way and that kind of thing. So
okay, all right. Surveys, policies, et cetera. As you grow together and use that tool, you will grow your evidence and your sources of evidence. And you'll find which sources of evidence really make a difference and which ones don't. The one encouragement that I will give you, and maybe you have this built into your plan, and I just haven't mastered your plan yet because I just kind of glanced at it today a little bit. One of the things I've noticed some districts have done after they had it in play for a while, not immediately, because it's a lot to absorb and to bring in, is when you talk about the sources of evidence, where are you getting the sources of evidence from? And now you're doing it in the right place because you're starting with your board members doing the analysis along with Kelly. Is that correct? Have you extended the surveys of those and the analysis of that, evaluation of that, be out like to administrators yet or staff members? Not yet?
No,
Okay.
This is our first time through.
Number one, right.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you haven't attempted to do all that then.
Yeah, this
My
is our-
point is, the evidence will change as you go
Mhm.
because as you grow, you guys will reach out and eventually at some time you'll be taking input from staff and their point of view on how you're doing on that, from your patrons in the community. And that's one of those avenues that will help you, Andrea, with an outlining community and outlining school. As you get to that level in a couple of years, you'll be able to pull in some information that would be more site specific that might help the board know more about a particular area, whether it's budget or whatever the content area is. So, yeah, again, you can't get it all done right away, but as you think down the road, that evidence will grow. Number 4, believe it or not, some districts do ask this question, and this is one that, how can we identify the things we need to work on as a board in a district? Well, you already have some avenues in play because you have your board governance piece that you're going to work on. So as board members, things that you can work on and improve and get better at. A little later on in this presentation, I'm going to break out for you 6 areas, but I have them listed here. You can come up with as many different standards or topical areas that you want to review and work on. But here, teaching and learning is one area, which is the most critical area I think that school districts are accountable for. Hard to remember that when we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic and you're dealing with budgets and trying to keep people healthy, right? But it is about teaching and learning. That is our number one thing that we do as educators and as board members. Another topical area is communication. You've mentioned that tonight. It seems like we can always find better ways and more effective ways to communicate out to our staff, to our public, to the patrons, et cetera, and back to you guys. Can you improve those areas? A third area is operations, that whole issue with food service. This whole food service thing has been completely different, if I understand correctly, since the COVID thing hit last spring, correct? You guys had all kinds of different ways that you did feeding programs and all kinds of things, I believe, for your community, in addition to what they normally have done. Budgeting, transportation, all the operation sides of the organization is a whole classification area that you can spend some time on. Another area is student activities and programs. No matter what size schools you're representing, activities and programs within those schools bring a lot of patrons and a lot of parents into the system. And it's one of those things that I know, after talking to some kids, they were so excited to get back to school so they could participate in their activities, whether it was band, football, or whatever it might have been. They just wanted to be back doing the things they enjoyed doing, those activities. That plays a real critical and big role in our organization. And culture. So earlier I said something about you control what you can control, and culture is one of the things you get to work on and control. That's one of the responsibilities of the district leadership team. How do we lead through this difficult time? And you're doing a nice job of that. You're working hard at it. And then the final one is governance, which, I give you kudos for that. You guys are how you choose to lead, manage, behave as a board, work together as a team, and work toward the direction that you want to work toward to make this a safe and a good organization for kids. So this document right here, as all of these are, and Kelly and Carol, you kind of know, I'll have some things here that you can come back and reference later. And if we do some kind of follow-up virtual, we can single in on any one of these things that rise to the top, if you will, as you guys move forward the next few months. You don't have to go through and answer all these and solve all these. These are think-abouts and areas that you might be able to focus in on as you move forward. Any questions on this page before I move on? I'm sorry, I forget to ask that sometimes. Okay. The whole area of policy, people ask questions, well, how does policy influence our decisions, actions, and delivery of our roles to the district community? And you've already answered some of these questions, a little repetitious here, but again, do you have self-evaluation process in place for each board member? You're putting one on, and Carol, thank you for explaining what you guys are doing with that. I think it's awesome. And then, do you measure what you're doing? And obviously you do. You guys have done all kinds of things in measurements. Hard to focus back on those when you're focusing on contact tracing and which kids are not in school and which staff members can't come to school. But these are other things that you have been doing and probably will continue to do. Kind of a repeat a little bit of the previous, but number 4. So as you move forward, and I'm optimistic that the COVID will be behind us in the future, and I'm hopefully in the near future that we can get control of that, push it behind us. The question I would ask then is, you get back to more of a normal routine in your organization. If things aren't changing or improving, what normally happens next? I know what's happened maybe in the past, you can reflect on that, but what you choose to do about it, if you recognize that you're struggling and not getting to where you want to be, what happens next? What kind of conversations will take place? What kind of strategies will you work on as a team? And are you going to have conversations to think about? Don't have to answer today. And then the final one, does the board ever have discussions on how they want to monitor how they're doing? Well, you do, because you put a board governance piece in, you are going to monitor how you're doing as a board. So those are critical and I think very important things for you to manage. So sometimes questions asked, so what policies do you want to spend some time on? And what I'd like to do, since you put so much work into it, is I just want to reflect on the board governance piece. And so if you could do me a favor back there and flip into that one. I know you guys know this. I don't know how well others know about this. As far as staff, community, I'm not sure how that was all totally unpacked. I know you took a lot of input at different points in time. Carol, can you talk a little bit about how this was unpacked and how people found out about it to begin with? I know you're just coming up on year one, so you haven't had a chance to really reflect with it yet.
We introduced it in like I said, I think it might have been December or January, we brought it up as far as board information. And our intent was to send it out to policy, because there's a process there where policy, it goes through policy and then it goes out to the district for comment, it goes out to the community for comment and those kinds of things. So our intention was to get it out that way. Unfortunately, things happened and policy, there were other things on policy that we didn't ever get to that point. So we ended up bringing it up month by month, and when we bring up whatever portion of the government leadership governance plan that we are looking at, we read through all of those items so the public knows what information is on there. It's in the board packet for people to look at. And then, like I said, each individual board member assesses each of the categories and then tends to give it a score that we kind of talk about a little bit at
right.
each board meeting. So that's kind of how we're trying to introduce it, is that way, since the initial plan really didn't work out.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Any other comments from other board members about process of getting this in place? And I know you're just starting the journey with it, but any other thoughts about how you got where you are so far? Okay, I'll go back to the presentation. What I'd like to do is just share a little bit of this, just the understanding and the theory behind it, Andrea, was simply this. Research out there has for years have said, and there's been different types of research that you can look at, but the Lighthouse Project out of Iowa is one of the basic ones from the early 90s, and numerous, the National School Boards Association, State of Wyoming, most state agencies that manage school boards and education, it had researched, and the bottom line, it's kind of an, like a, oh really? But if board members really worked hard on identifying roles and responsibilities, and administration did, there's a higher probability that the team would work more effectively together, which kind of makes sense. And also that there could be more focus on the things that you should be spending your quality time on, instead of those other things. And every district has those other things, whatever that might be. And so kind of the format that the state of Wyoming has used, and a lot of other states, is the first chapter has to deal with what the board's behaviors are, as far as called chapter 1. Can you put that up for me again, please? We're still on the board governance, the last slide that was there. And can you blow that up just a smidgen to make it a little bit bigger? Yeah, I'm gonna, do I have control to move the slides? I do, don't I? Can you make that a little bigger print is my question. Thank you. So what chapter 1 really is what board behaviors are expected and the responsibilities that you have. Let's see if it'll go to the next. Can you move it to the next page, please? Yeah, forward, sorry. Keep going. Keep going. There's an introduction, kind of gives a little background. Go on to the next one, please. So in chapter 1, it says 1.1, it talks about commitment. And if you slide down the page just a smidgen, it says where the board is committed to. It's reassuring people what you're committed to. And it says what the Board of Trustees will do, that you're going to prioritize with emphasis on organization, vision, mission, core values, encourage and respect diversity of viewpoints, focus on strategic leadership. One of the interesting things is a lot of boards gets challenged whether that's what you can really spend your time doing or not, because other things take you away from that. And other things like COVID, other things like budget and all those things, they're all very important. You don't get to let go of any of those, but it's hard to put your arms around them and then come back and remind yourself, these are the things that should be the number one focus of what I should be doing as a board member. And let's slide down a little bit further. We'll go to the second one. Talks about Board of Trustees covenants. And let me see what you have in there. Accordingly, members will participate within the following guidelines. So this whole chapter 1 is about how me as a board member, how am I going to behave? How am I going to act? What am I supposed to be doing? Oh, you can let me do that, huh? You think I can manage that? You're giving me a lot of technology. This gets scary, Max and George. I may lose you. They gave me controls. Board member authority. Because all powers of the board lie in the action as a group, individual board member exercise their authority at a legal meeting of the board. What does that mean to you as board members? You guys wrote that, you adopted it. What does that mean? Your point of view. You can't be wrong, by the way.
Well, as an individual, we have no power at all. Our power is a collective power, and only when we're meeting in a board meeting.
In making decisions for the district.
Correct.
But you still have authority and power as an individual to have an opinion, correct?
You can have an opinion, but it's separate from,
Okay.
once the board takes a vote, regardless of what your opinion was regarding the vote is what the board agreed to.
Got it. And sometimes that's not easy to do. Sometimes boards, you have 7 board members, correct?
Mhm.
So sometimes you're going to have votes, and I get this question frequently from boards. I just got it Saturday up in Fremont County. Is it okay if we don't have a 7-0 vote? Of course it is. Is it okay if we have a 7-0 vote? Of course it is. You hear terms like rubber stamping or people aren't being team players. As long as the board feels that they were well informed, the superintendent's done a good job of sharing the information, and board members can come into a board meeting feeling like I have enough information to make an opinion and take a vote on this. And you have a healthy debate and you've done your research and your homework, and your vote may be different because you're a group of individuals and you have different opinions. And Carol, you're correct. As a team, your authority and your power is when you vote as a group and you have a quorum and you vote and you pass something. But it's perfectly okay to have differences of opinion, and it's perfectly okay to have a 5-2 vote or a 4-3 vote. What's not okay is what you kind of mentioned here. It's not okay then to be obstructionist about it or to demean the people that run the other side of the vote. That does not show a strong leadership team when that happens. It's okay to voice your opinion. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. But once that decision's made, you move on to whatever the next agenda item is you have, because you have other agenda items, correct? And if you all 7 vote in favor of something, I'd say it's a celebration. That means you did your homework, you worked hard at it, you learned it, and you guys all agree it's an important thing to do. So I don't think there's a right or wrong when it comes to how things are approved, other than if you don't feel like you're informed enough or have enough information, then it's your job to speak up and ask for more information and more help on whatever that topic might be. And I know most of you are not quiet. You're willing to speak up and ask for help, because I've witnessed and worked with some of you before, and you're not afraid to learn. So that's a great thing. You're heading in the right direction. All right. How about back to that slide? So I think, how am I moving this thing, guys? Clicking on the right? Show me where. Oh, duh. Okay. Thank you. General communications. Focus on issues that deal primarily with policy formulation, financial health, superintendent performance, listening, I have a slide later on today about listening. You're going to chuckle when you see it, kind of, but it's a good reminder for all of us. Speaking, hard sometimes to stay calm on things when you have pretty strong emotional attachment to an issue, and are you being challenged like this whole thing coming up with budget down the road? That's going to be emotionally charged, and people are going to have to work really hard at focusing on what you control and what you don't control. Decision making. I have a slide in here about decision making. As a new board member, sometimes you may ask the question, who makes what decisions and when and where and why? In other words, when does the superintendent make a decision versus when does the board make the decision? Or when do we collaboratively make decisions? And I would imagine that this board's like every other board and district leadership team. You probably have a variety of different things that Kelly's responsible to make decisions on. You have a variety of things that Kelly may make the decision, then come and share it with you as a board that this was done. Or she may bring things to you that you as a board will discuss before a decision is made, and you may ask for her recommendation because she's the expert in that arena, and she's going to give you a recommendation from a leadership standpoint. And then there are times that you guys will discuss as a large group together and work through it and decide what the answer is going to be for a problem. It changes by issue and by event and by standard, whatever it is you're working on. But having conversations sometimes about that and having some questions answered up front before you have to get to that point sometimes helps new board members better understand why is that decision made by that person, or do we make this collectively, or how's that happen? I got a little cheat sheet that you can kind of look at later. So these behaviors that boards do, I'm not going to reach through all of them, but these are ones you're accountable for. There's a code of conduct. Some of these are pulled from national examples. Some things come from statutes. Conflict of interest, depending on who you are, you're in a community where you may have businesses in the community that work with the district. There are guidelines. You may have family members that are employees in the district. There's some guidelines that you have to follow in relationship to that. And I see you guys did a nice job of cross-referencing other policies that you have in your operation policy. Yes. Comment?
I'm wondering if one of our trustees has a
Oh,
comment.
is there a comment, Max or George?
Hi, Rob. Thank you. One of the key points for me is number 6 in that board superintendent relationship.
Okay.
I would like some feedback on my perspective. My perspective of a board role is that we, as the elected officials, should be sort of the shield for the superintendent and the other administrators and even teachers when things have to happen, whether it's a budgetary issue or a procedural issue that are unpopular with the community. I see it as our job to sort of stand up and take the tomatoes so that the professionals can go in and do the work.
Yep.
And then we all assess that outcome.
Yep.
But the consequences of that decision should rest with us as the sort of political elected people and not with the superintendent. That the superintendent and administrator shouldn't be protective of us. We're supposed to be protective of them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. I just wanted to
Excellent
clarify.
point. Excellent point, Max. Thank you. And I hopefully we'll touch on that a bit more as we go through here. Thank you for sharing that. How do I get that back up? Do you guys do that back there for me? Okay, thank you. So as Max was talking about, that is a really valid point, and that's part of the whole thing about the roles and responsibilities, knowing where that's at. And one of the probably as you move forward with this process, and I know Carol, you already know this, and Kelly knows this, but as you move forward with the use of, all right, how come I'm not moving? Right click. There we go. Got it. Thank you. As you move forward with this process, now this just talks about the board's behavior and the board's role, but the second chapter is the one that I think transparency and unpacking what that's all about is very, very important. Here's some more roles on chapter 1. Let me get to the next one. You have committees. You'll be on a committee potentially,
Rod,
Andrea.
if I may, before we go to the next chapter,
Uh-huh.
let's eat. Let's eat.
Which one?
Let's eat.
Comida.
Take a
Food.
break. Just take a quick break.
Oh, you need a break?
Well,
okay.
we've got food over here.
There's food. I'm sorry. There's food. I don't know how I'm going to get it to you guys, Max and George, but we'll take a short break here. Let's take about a 5-minute break or so. Grab your food. You want a little longer than that? What do you need?
I would say we might need 10.
Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute break, guys. Is that okay?
If you can DoorDash me the food, that'll be lovely.
We'll see about that. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we're gonna come back and finish up the chapter 1, then jump into chapter 2. That's where the definition of roles and responsibilities, what the board's role is in a particular area, and what the soup's role is. And Max, your comments, kudos to you for sharing that. That is so critical because you as board members will learn that, and most of the time, hopefully, we'll practice that. But the expectation and the transparency of what people in the public know, including your staff and your patrons, don't know that. And so being able to share that, and down the road in the next year or two, when you have evidence that you can use, and you can involve those people in that process of sharing their opinions and thoughts about how things are going, that's a great time where you get to educate what these roles and responsibilities are. Hard to do it when it's in theory up front. A lot easier to apply once you've done it for a couple of years and you're involving the people in the process. So let's take a 10-minute break. I have to bring that slide up, or are you guys going to bring it back up? Oh, awesome. I was just going to say dealing with the board behaviors, board roles, one of the things was the development and adoption of policies. You guys are going to continue to revisit those. And then we get into chapter 2, which is what I mentioned right before the break. That's where there's some help, at least for new board members. I saw the value in this with a lot of school districts. If they hired a new superintendent or had a change of board members and people came in and really weren't 100% sure. So what's really my role as a board member? And a new superintendent may have worked in a previous district where the school board and the superintendent had different roles and responsibilities than the district they'd moved into. Sometimes they're very common, but sometimes they do change because you're talking about a people business, right? So things do change. So one of the areas that I think is really critical, and I know you guys have started this process, is to define, I'm going to put that slide back. There we go. Thank you. Is to define what those roles and response, and they break them into several different areas, Andrea. One is general. So this basically says, you'll see the likeness of it. The board will focus on the district on learning and achievement for all students. We've talked about other things tonight, just so you know, right? Because there are other businesses you have to deal with. But you go through here and explains each of the board's roles and then the superintendent's role. And I'm sharing this with you because I believe of all the policies that you have and all the documents that you deal with, if I was a board member on your board, I'd want to be extremely well versed in this. If I was your superintendent, I'd want to be extremely well versed in this because sometimes it's not just the board chair or not just the superintendent that's responsible for these behaviors. It's all of the people on your team. And so it's your job to do the checks and balances and make sure that you're following and doing the things that you agreed in policy that you were going to follow. So let's go through a couple more of these real quickly. Policy. Their board of trustees has a role in that, a major role. Superintendent has a role in that. Regulations. I want to get to one here that's a hot topic for tonight. Not so much the meetings. That's good to know about. There's one on budget somewhere, is there not? Keep going. Budget and finance. The board, in collaboration with the superintendent, will establish priorities for the financial management of the district. The board will provide the superintendent with the board's priorities and parameters for development of the budget. I don't believe board members per se actually develop the budget. You talk about your priorities and where you want to be. And Kelly's job and the business manager is to bring that data back to you and that information. And then you guys tear it apart and discuss it, work on it, and try to figure out different avenues of how you're going to manage it. Earlier tonight, you were talking about major budget cuts. And just if someone's listening in, why that is brought up, that decision hasn't been made first and foremost, but the school districts in Wyoming received communication from, I believe, LSO, is that correct? Legislative Service Office, that basically gave kind of a list of here's what you could expect to happen in the next few years if we don't do something different with the finances in the state of Wyoming. And as I understand it, over a 3-year period, approximately a 43% proposed cut across the board is kind of what they had. They broke it out over 3 years, like 16% or something the first year, I believe. Was that what it was? Then 13.5 and 13.5. But it added up to 43% because I sat in one of those teleconferences on that conversation. Well, for those that do math and for those that run businesses, if you had to cut 40% of your budget to run your business, I'm not sure your business would stay afloat. And school organization is a business. It's supported by tax dollars from a variety of sources, but to cut 40% over a 3-year period, I've got almost 40 years experience in the profession. I'm not really sure that's even practical. So I don't know how you would do that. I just don't know, because most school districts in Wyoming, I would tell you that 80 to 90% of their budget deals with personnel, deals with their staff. That's where that money goes. So they may have up to 20% maybe to work with. There might be a few districts that have a little more than that, but max 20% of your budget goes through non-personnel related kind of things. That's where you buy the textbooks and the computers and all the other things that you do to run your school district. So getting back to budget, and what your role is as a school board and what the superintendent's role is. And I'm glad to hear that you guys are taking an approach to educate others outside the school walls, so to speak, about what this is all about. And I think the legislature, it's their responsibility, not the local school board's responsibility, to come up with funding sources. You guys follow the guidelines that are established in the state of Wyoming, and you have to follow those, and you receive funding based on whatever those guidelines are. Certain percentage of property taxes, those kinds of things. There are different funding sources, like federal government has some funding sources, et cetera. But school boards do not control, other than bonding, maybe special tax, 0.5% or 1% for boaties, those kind. You don't control the bulk of where the money comes from. That's controlled by the legislators.
Right.
And so the topic and the conversations I've heard from many board members and superintendents across the state is simply, well, everybody kind of gets, and I understand if I was a superintendent working in the district right now, or if I was a board member, I would have probably reacted the very same way. That's crazy. There's no way we can do that. The real focus should be, and I think you guys are taking that avenue, is so what do we control and what don't we control in this conversation? And what you do control is making people aware of the information that's out there, being, what's the right term? I don't want to say patient, but allowing the process to happen, whereas you're going to share the information and the knowledge you have. And then the knowledge you have is what you get to work with when you start working on your budget and doing your scenarios, I guess I would call them. Maybe, for year one, this might be one option, one scenario we work with. If we get 10% cut, this is the scenario, what it might look like. That's when you can go ahead and engage your patrons and your staff and others to share information with you. But ultimately, you as a board, with the recommendation of your administration, makes recommendations about what those dollars should be. What you don't probably get to do is to tell the legislators how to do the funding. I believe that's their role. They have to determine how they're going to do the funding, how they're going to generate the revenue. Yeah. You could share, I think what would be really valuable is when you engage others on your scenario building and the direction you're going to go, what impact does that really have in your organization? And I think we got to be really, really careful as school districts that we don't want to panic staff members, don't want to panic the public that, next year we're going to close 9 schools. But I think in your scenario building, I think you have to be obviously very real about what that may or may not look like. And that's the information I think probably, Carol, different districts like you guys and others are going to send that to legislators and send that to the state so they can see what the impact of those changes would be. Is that part of your guys' thinking?
We
in your
already
game
have,
plan?
we already have staff members asking if they're going to have a job next year.
Well, they have a
know,
right
I mean,
to ask
that's
that. Absolutely.
That's the logical question for them to ask,
Absolutely.
and we have taken part of the letter is the possibility of taking a position of support of the penny tax.
Mhm.
Because that's the one area that
Right.
the legislature has not addressed is
Right.
any revenue income.
The key is they have the authority
Mhm.
to generate the revenue. They have the constitutional right, as I understand it, to fund schools appropriately so that you can deliver the basket of goods. And I would not blame any staff member for worrying about what's going to happen, because if that, you'll have people pro and con about schools have too much money or not enough money or whatever it is. But I would just put out there, you don't make that decision about how much money's coming to you. You make the decision how you're going to prioritize and spend your money on the things the money that you do receive and what you get. But to share your concerns with the legislature and with the powers to be and make suggestions like revenue and those things, different ideas, you have all the right in the world to do that as a citizen and as a person that has to operate with the funding that you get. But I believe that the unpacking and the timing of how this all works is critical. And I believe this conversation happened, and I don't know if it's changed. At one time, they were talking about the legislators meeting later. Has that been changed? Or are they going to meet later or not? Do we know?
It's pretty certain they're not going to meet till April.
We
Okay.
don't, we just don't know how late they're gonna meet.
Well, and so what that does for you guys, and I think this is going to get addressed because I think I heard this publicly, that when you deal with your staff, you have a date that you have to let them know if they're going to
April
return.
15th.
Yeah,
April
April 15th. And I believe the legislators are aware of that and they will, I'm hoping that somehow they can, what do you call it, when you just kind of put a law,
Grandfather,
grandfathered, or you put it at a standstill or a holding place and say, we're not going to apply this law this year. You can't really tell staff members if they have a job or not for next year by April 15th. If you have no idea what the money's going to be till May 15th, that puts you in an absolute impossible position. So I think the work you guys are talking about doing when it relates to budget, again, comes back to what you can control and what you can't control. And I like the idea that you're putting some committees together and you're drafting some letters and trying to share some information. But I think making sure that people understand what you control and what you don't control, the information you've received. Many districts have had conversations. Geez, do we share this letter with the patrons? Do we share it with the staff? My advice, I mean, you got to do what you feel comfortable doing, but I think as you do something like that, I think you need to give more information around it so people understand what you're going to try to do with that information and that you may build some scenarios. But none of it's going to happen until you actually know what the money is or is not. I mean, I think that's critical to have that conversation. I, like many, I would be thinking the same way. I mean, if I'm an employee, I'm going to be thinking the same thing. Do I have a job or don't I have a job next year? And I guess the reality that I look at is we probably didn't expect that our whole country was going to be turned upside down in the world with COVID. So crazier things can happen, I know, but I have to believe that you can only act and work on what you actually know for sure, 100%. And whenever that's going to be that the legislators are going to give you that dollar amount, then that's when the rubber meets the road about what your next steps are going to be. But the fact that you're going to plan several different scenarios because you don't know what the steps are going to be, you got to guess what the steps are going to be, and you have to put a plan together so when it hits, you guys get to deal with it. And I'm assuming that's what you guys have been talking about and what you're thinking about. Is that pretty much how you see it?
One of the things we know is that just with enrollment and then the previous legislative cuts, the district will be in a deficit of 3 million. And that is per se ground zero before whatever the legislature chooses to do. So, and we've been very open with our staff to let them know. We do 3-year projections as we go. And so,
Awesome.
a lot of them, I went into schools last Friday and into a secondary building and an elementary, and I had staff at both of the schools. They were asking, am I going to be okay? Do I have a job or do I need to start updating my resume and getting that ready to go? And so, but when you have that information out there and you let them know that, to right size the district just for next year, we've got to do something about that 3 million. And then whatever happens with the legislatures, a different issue, for them. So whatever we can do to retain them, keep those good people here, is really important.
Yeah, and it's like we said earlier, everything kind of touches everything with this stuff. You put the COVID over the top of it and look at all the businesses that have had to close down and people that have lost jobs on top of it. It's not just impacting the schools, it's impacting everybody. But that's COVID. Above and beyond COVID, you have a legislature that's recommending, because of shortfalls in funding and revenue on their end, they're recommending potentially cuts up to 43%. And so who knows where it's going to end up? I don't know, but the fact that you guys are reaching out, that's that real important part about transparency. You get to own the good news, the good, bad, and the ugly, right? As a school board, you're accountable for all of that. And I think the better and the more effectively you can share and be sincere and honest about that. We're going to talk a little bit later here about trust building and kind of how you do that. There's probably never a more challenging time in the world right now in a leadership positions than try to grow that trust that you have with the people you serve and the stakeholders you work with. And so it sounds like you're attempting to do just about everything you can control at this point in time. So kudos to you for trying that. But reflecting back to this board governance piece, this is a time that this does make sense, really makes an impact, because it helps you as board members identifying your role. It helps Kelly in her role as a superintendent, knowing that you have responsibilities that you have to pay attention to, especially what's a policy, you're going to pay attention to it all the time, but especially when you're dealing with more difficult things that you have to put on your plate, it helps you. It doesn't solve the problem, but at least helps you in the processing of where you're going to go. So kudos for you for moving through that and trying to accomplish that. I'd like to take a look at your evaluation piece, and you're saying that I can do that maybe myself, or can you do that for me? I would like the one that says this right here. The school board self, it's the next one in your list. Yeah, thank you. And can you make that a little bigger? Thanks. So what you guys have done, and again, you're in year one, and I'm really curious to see as you go through this process, Carol, with your board members, kind of the results of what you're going to get when you go through and do your survey. You guys have done a really nice job, I think. You have your reasons for the board self-evaluation. Number one, student achievement. You put the number one priority in there. That is why you're here, number uno. Accountability piece. You are extremely accountable here. And to ensure regular and honest review of the board's own performance. Those that are willing to roll their sleeves up and put it out there are people that, people like to follow and like to be a part of and will start to trust more than they do now. To access success and failures. That's that good, bad, and ugly piece. You guys got that as an important ingredient. Strengthen areas for improvement. We're going to show you a couple other avenues to come up with that. That's good. Framework for goal setting, purpose of the evaluation, and inform the public. And as you do this for a couple of years, you guys will start moving out on gathering a deeper level of evidence. You'll get more information as you go, and that'll better help where you're going to go as an organization. The benefits right there, of course, your credibility, perceptions of each board member, your dialogue gets a little deeper. We in education, sometimes you're so busy with so much, we do that basic covering of everything about 2 inches deep, but it would really be nice to have more time that you could get into specific areas and go down a mile or two and learn a little more and have a little more knowledge about things so you can make a little longer lasting decisions about things. And the way things are set up, sometimes we don't have the opportunity to dig as deep as we'd like to learn more. This may provide you the opportunity to focus on, less areas and dig a little deeper instead of trying to know everything about everything, which sometimes pretty hard to do. Now, Kelly, you don't have that option. You have to take care of everything because that's your role as a superintendent. You got to be responsible for everything, and the board is as well. But when you really want to spend that quality time, you can go a little deeper, and this allows you that opportunity, which is so neat. So you have an assessment process here that you go through, and you guys have a scoring mechanism. And my assumption is you're going to then, when you collect all this, then what happens next, Carol? When everybody does this and fills them out, then what are you guys going to do?
It comes as part of the board packet as far as the evaluation form. Each board member fills it out, and then we have a discussion at the board meeting. I read all the different options, the different categories, I should say, so that the public knows what it is we're looking at, and then we ask the board members to give us a score in that category.
Okay. And probably one of the things that you might find, at least my experience has been with other districts going through this, I experienced it personally, but I've seen other districts experience when you start this evaluation process and you're holding your meetings in the public, so you're sharing that information and people get a chance to hear that. At some point, people are going to say, well, when do we get to make an opinion about that? That will happen. And I think as you unpack this and move forward, that's one of the things you guys can prepare to deal with and say, you know what, we are going to grow this as we go. Initially, we're responsible for this. That's why we're doing it policy-wise. And as we grow this, we'll widen our boundaries and go a little deeper with the evidence that we want to pull together. And that's very natural, 2-3 years of working toward that. And you'll find when it's the right fit for where you want to be, that you feel like you have the evidence that you want. It just takes a little time. But initially, perfect, at least for you guys to be able to share your opinions of where you think you are, where you aren't in relationship to your duties and your responsibilities. So Andrea, this whole piece right here on the governance is, if I was going to be a new board member, I'd spend some time, and a new superintendent, I'd spend some time reading through that. And I'd ask clarifying questions too, as if it doesn't read quite right to you, you're not 100% sure what it means. make sure you ask and have those conversations, because these guys have had discussions, and I think they have a pretty good sense of what they want from it.
Well, we've expressed too, that this is a work in progress.
Absolutely it is.
I mean, if we find some things that we really feel like we need to change, then
Yep.
so be it.
And you will, as the board changes, as the roles change on the board, you're going to have more conversations about how we do business. Kelly, how long have you been superintendent?
7 years,
And has the board changed in 7 years?
very much.
Yeah. And board members that have been on the board, has the board changed in the last 7 years? Or 5 years or 4 years, how many years you've been on? And Andrea, you're going to be on for 4 years, maybe longer. There will be changes. And so having some guidance and some practical roles and responsibilities defined gives you a good running start at being an effective team and doing the things you need to be doing. And that's really the advantage. And so kudos to you guys for doing that. Could we get back to the main PowerPoint? Yeah, I have the power to do that. Is it that one right there? Yeah, I'm at the bottom right here. Is that it? The PowerPoint is at the very far right. That one? Serious? Okay. No, I thought it was this one. Nope, that's not the one I want either. All right, I'll let you find it for me. Thank you. Okay, so anything on board governance leadership, Carol, that you or any other board members want to add or any comments on it? You guys have done really some nice work. I'm really anxious to see where you go with it and what you learn. Anything
Like I said,
else you guys
We're
got?
just trying to get through it the first time and kind of feel our way.
Okay.
and So,
Good. And most board members at this point, you're supportive of where you're at, feel comfortable that what you have in play for now? I got a head nod from Matt. How about Max and George? You guys okay with where you're at with it for thus far?
Yes, sir.
All right, awesome. All right, so here's something a little light,
Yes, sir.
not so deep right here, folks. My former mentor, Sue Bellish, who did a lot of board trainings, she stole this from somewhere. I don't know where she got it. And she gave it to me. And I think sometimes as a board member, you may find that you may be on either end one of these. And I just want you to know it's okay. A school board member must be all things to all people. Visiting schools is snooping. Failing to visit schools, lack of interest. Now, this is humor now, right? Okay. All right. But you may find some of these true on occasion. Okay. Increasing salaries is too expensive. Failing to increase salaries is anti-employee. Evaluating is being critical, and failing to evaluate, you're arbitrary. Voting yes is rubber stamping. Voting no is controversial. We had that discussion earlier. Oops. Settling is caving in. Failing to settle is bad faith. Firing a coach, you're too involved. Failing to fire a coach, you're unresponsive. People don't know. They think you fire coaches. You don't. The recommendation has to come from supervisors and administrators and goes to the soup. Soup shares it with you. The general public in general does not fully understand the roles and responsibilities of a school board member or a superintendent. That's why your board governance leadership document is so valuable down the road as you start to interchange and have conversations. That helps get rid of statements like this. Asking questions is micromanaging. Failing to ask is a sign of indifference. Please ask questions. Attending conventions is a free vacation, kind of like tonight. You're here on a free vacation with me in a conference. And failing to attend, you have tunnel vision, you don't care. A board member can't always be right, but must always keep the students in sight. And I would just say kudos to your organization. Kids here, I think, are a priority, and they have been for a long time. I've witnessed it for a long, long time. But you can continue to get better, and that's why you're here. Okay, let's see here. I'm trying to move this thing. Come on, oh, there we go. All right, a little bit of work. The first one is called expectations. Now, we're not going to stop and do all of these, but I do want to spend just a little time in pointing them out to you so that you can see what we have. Yes, sir. There's a thing on the side. Oh, use that now. Okay. All right. Now I'm up on a screen on the side. I don't want to touch anything else. Help me. I'm good? Okay. Awesome. Expectations. They gave me 2 remotes. My wife doesn't even give me 1 remote, just so you know that, all right? They gave me 2 remotes and asked me to use it with great technology, and I screwed it up. Expectations. One of the things that I have found a lot of boards do, effective boards, good boards, is they revisit their expectations of what the board can expect from the superintendent. And just as important, what the superintendent can expect from the board. And can you make this a little bit bigger, please, for those of us in the room? I know they can look at their thing, but just a smidgen bigger. Maybe? Bueller? Can't do it? Okay, no problem. But if you take a look at that, it really, you could flip flop a lot of this data, a lot of these statements and put them on either side and they'd probably apply. But the first one on the left, what can the board expect from the SOUP? Always sharing the landscape of upcoming issues. So one of the most important things when I served on a board was I didn't like a lot of surprises. I wanted to know kind of what was happening. I'd hear things in the news and I'd read stuff on Facebook and, you know, you'd pick stuff up through the newspaper or wherever, snail mail, whatever. And you just didn't want to be surprised as a board member. So as a superintendent, one of their tasks and jobs is always to be looking on the horizon and sharing as much as they possibly can, not panicking, but sharing information about, hey, this is yet to come or this is on the horizon. And then obviously as a superintendent, you'd like the board to make sure they give you a heads up on issues that they are aware of that's coming their way. No surprises on that end. And a rule of thumb for board members, and those of you that are veteran board members, you know this, you've dealt with this already. But sometimes you hear things from people, or people call you and share a concern, a staff member or whatever, and you get to ask the $1 million question. Did they want me just to listen? Do they want me to take this and do something with it? Those questions go through your mind. As an individual board member, the rule of thumb is this: if there's ever something that comes across you that you're not 100% sure if you should be sharing it with the superintendent or the board chair, the answer is what, board members?
Sure.
Share it. Yeah, share it with the board chair or share it with the superintendent. Allow them their opportunity to deem if that's something that everybody in the board needs to be aware of or not. And then, of course, you would manage it and handle it as process. That helps eliminate kind of surprises and things that are going on. Doesn't eliminate them. It helps you as a team be ready to deal with whatever issues come up. So that's a two-way street. Another one of the things that came up over talking to a lot of boards was your SOUP should be knowledgeable on all academic related topics. Kelly's an expert in education. She's been training for more than a few years. She's got a lot of expertise. Sometimes you're fortunate enough to have a board member or two that has an educational background, but not all boards get that. The training that Kelly has is specialized, and she's supposed to know more about these things related to teaching and learning than the general board member. And so go use her expertise. Use her expertise. Ask her for help and guidance. And on the flip side, board members willing to be prepared or informed of upcoming agenda issues. I tell this to board members and I probably won't go back to their districts. But being on a school board is more than just meeting once or twice a month at a meeting in the public. And I think most of you can attest to that. You're doing homework all the time. You're learning, you're listening, you're sharing information, you're studying, you're on committees. And as you grow, you're going to do more and more of that. But the nice part about that is when you go into a board meeting, you can feel rather comfortable of your knowledge base and at least the information that you have going into a topic. It doesn't mean it's not going to be easy. It just means you'll feel more comfortable about knowing what it is you know. And so I always encourage my board members and the board members that I work with, you're going to put in far more time than meeting once or twice a month. And I think those of you that have been on the board, you're all nodding your heads. So, and it's Kelly's job to engage you, and it's your job as board members to engage yourself in that and to grow. Student focus in all decisions. You guys know that. This number 3 could be a challenge for board members, providing resources and avenues to deliver to the vision. This whole issue with what's happening with budget, that's going to be a challenge for all of you. But I think you're prepared to at least have conversations and work toward solving that. The whole key here, folks, is create your own expectations of what you expect from either party. As a SOUP, what do you need the board to help you to do your job better? As board members, what do you need from the SOUP to do your job better? Have a conversation about that at some point, an exchange of, it could be a one-on-one conversation, or you guys can do it as a group, however you so choose. But I think it's healthy to revisit what the expectations are. Sometimes we just assume that this is what it is, and things change. So, make sense? Yada? Okay. Now, for Andrea, these are in here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but the way we do business, it asks questions and then I allow the board members to answer those questions so you can feel comfortable with it. I've had some boards just put them in writing and give them to new board members, kind of help them. I've had conversations, like, for example, number one, how the board meeting agenda is developed and how to place items on the agenda. Andrea probably doesn't know that. Maybe she does. Carol, how does that happen?
Have a conversation with me.
Okay.
Usually, I mean, that's what, when we've had board members that have requested information, they just bring it up to me. And I meet with Kelly, like this morning, we met this morning to set the agenda for Monday's meeting. And, I've requested things to be added to the agenda. We have standard things that are on the agenda, and as the circumstances arise, different things come up. We've got a budget hearing, an audit coming up this month because that's the month for the audit
Yep.
stuff. So certain times of the year, certain things come up, and but that's how that agenda is set.
One of the responsibilities of the sitting board is when a new board member comes on is to assist and guide you in your training. And Kelly and the board members work together that. And this document might be a good document. They can tweak it, change it, come up with some different questions that they want. But having these kind of documents prepared so when new board members come on or a new superintendent comes on, it's nice to kind of build off the expectations and go, how do we do business? And I think it's healthy for people that have been together for a little while to review it on occasion as well, because sometimes things change, priorities change. And so having some discussion about, are we changing some of these things? If you so choose to do that, you want to make sure that all the players know exactly what that is.
Well, and when I said me acting in the role of chairman, one of the first thing on the agenda Monday night is to reorganize the board. So following the election in December, then we reorganize the board. So whoever the board chair is, I should qualify that.
And there are a couple other questions in here. One that's really very common for new board members, and veteran board members. When you became a new board member, a lot of times new board members are a target for people in the community and on the staff to ask a lot of questions and make a lot of demands. And so it's very normal. And it's okay not to have the answers for everything. You become a good listener because you're a good person. And then, like we mentioned earlier, there's times you take that information forward, and there's times when that's a gut call you get to make each time that it happens. But it does happen. Sometimes people like to complain to board members about personnel, about staff. And there's a process for how you manage that. Again, revisiting those kind of things are really important. Max made a comment earlier about the role of the board and the role of the superintendent with the changes and the complaints and how things get done and who makes the final decisions. Sometimes you got to remind people of educating people and taking those interactions, make those opportunities to teach and learn about the roles and responsibilities of board members and the superintendent. That helps the community become better stakeholders in their engagement with you as well, because they know kind of how the system works. I think sometimes when you're in a system, we forget sometimes the people on the outside, what they know or don't know, not any fault on theirs, but we sometimes don't share how we do business. And so it's an opportunity every time you have one of those interactions.
So what are our policies on this board for when board members are approached by members of the public who want to complain about a staff member or something that's going on? How do we handle that?
There's different ways. Often it comes in the form of an email. You'll get an email, and what I typically do is, let's say it's a personnel issue or something like that, or even just, something about a student or something like that. I will ask the person for permission to forward that email to the superintendent. And once I get that permission, then I forward it to Kelly, and Kelly is really good about following up, not only with that individual, but usually includes me, unless there's some confidential information, but will include me in the email so I know what the response is that was given to the person. But, usually, it's her responsibility to handle those things. And again, we're not the fixers. We want to be the fixers, but we're not really the fixers. And so the protocol is to go through the superintendent.
Yeah. And one of those unknowns that I talk about is patrons in general they don't mean harm when they when they come to you and share that information. They think that's how it's supposed to be done because they know you and they trust you. So they'll bring stuff to you like that. You get to make the judgment call on, how serious is this issue. And as I mentioned earlier, and Carol talked about, every board member experiences that at different levels. We just do. There's complaints. It happens a couple of different ways. You could be in a board meeting and somebody from the audience, if you're taking public comment, can make a comment that's, probably needs to be dealt with as personnel, needs to be dealt in executive session, or it's something you can't discuss at that time. So usually a board chair or the super or combination will say, thank you for sharing that information. Our superintendent will give you a buzz tomorrow and visit with you about it. And then as a board, if we need to deal with anything, we'll be involved at the level we need to be involved. But getting the information to the right person is probably the most important. And it's usually your board chair or your soup. The other part is, we're in Wyoming, so we're pretty kind people. So when people come to us with issues, we're good listeners as board members. We listen to what their issue. You have to be careful that you're not going to promise them something you can't do as an individual board member because you don't have that authority. But you can sure promise to listen, and you can sure promise to pass that information on. And even on occasion, then if Kelly ends up with something and has to deal with it, depending on what it is, she'll get a response back to the general board and say, hey, this question came across. Here's kind of how we're managing it. That's where it is. Sometimes there'll be situations, especially if it's personnel related, board members got to be a little bit careful about how much information Kelly would give back to you because there's processes, for people that file grievances or go through a due process. Board members got to be non-biased in that at some point along the way. So you'll get some information. It might sound something like this. Andrea, thank you for passing that on to me. It's a personnel matter that we're dealing with right now. And if I can share more information to the board at a later date, I will do so. But for right now, we're working on the situation. And that may be all you're going to hear initially, to not be frustrated with that, but to trust that your superintendent and other parties are doing what they need to do. And if you continue to hear things and it doesn't get better, then you go in and have a private conversation and share again. And you can have a conversation about that and may or may not learn more depending on whatever the topic is. So that does happen. Carol, anything on that?
Yeah,
or-
we preface our public comment with a statement that says if it's a personnel issue or
Right.
something like that, what the process is of doing that and that this is not the
Yeah.
appropriate time to do
Yeah.
that. So I think we've been pretty fortunate in that area.
Well, and this whole COVID thing's been another test for that because not everybody agrees what the right strategy is for this, that, or the other. So that does happen. And you just got to treat it with dignity and process it and manage it the best you can manage it. Nobody has miracle answers for anything at the moment. If someone's emotionally upset about something, and sometimes it's not a quick answer. So, all right. So anyway, there's one for you to go back to on this slide. Thank you. The next area is really similar. It's just the how do I. There are questions in there that you may want to take a look at. And if you have an interest in them, you go ahead and ask those of Kelly or Carol and they can help you. Earlier, I talked about levels of decision-making. Here's just one model that I stole from the district and I share it. People can come up with their own if you so choose, but having some dialogue occasionally about who makes what decisions. Your board governance guidelines for roles and responsibilities helps with this quite a bit, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to throw this out. When does the soup just make the call and then share it with you? When does the soup bring information to you and you guys discuss it before you go? Like hiring people, depending on the level of engagement that the board has with that, usually the superintendent has a variety of people that are involved in the hiring practices in the district, following policy and things like you're hiring teachers or principals. You got team players that do that, right? Comment from someone? Yeah, Max or George? Yellow. No? Okay, if they buzz me, we'll go.
Okay.
But there are processes for that because sometimes patrons will think board members have control over who got the math job at Rock Springs High School or who got the football coaching job or who got hired as the bus driver. And the reality of it is, as board members, that's not your arena. I mean, that's not your role per se. You have policies and procedures, how that gets done. Kelly's job is to use her expertise and the people she works with to get that job done. And then, yes, Kelly does bring that information back to the board for board approval because you're awarding the person a contract or, you're offering employment and the board does have a role in that. So again, that's one of those very common ones I think all board members have probably had experiences with, that we just haven't, as a institution, over the years, probably haven't done a good enough job of explaining to people how that works. Because I know when I've served on the college board, there were people hitting me up for things that they thought I had authority to do that I just didn't have the authority to do. And I know board members I've worked with across the state, same thing. But you guys are caring, wonderful people. And so you want to make sure that that patron doesn't walk away angry at you. You want to make sure that you listen to them and that you share with them that you'll pass on their concerns and take care of it and do what you can. You can't make other promises beyond that. But personnel is one that comes up a lot. It just does. So here's a decision-making one. Okay to revisit that. Now, remember, I'm giving you guys a lot of stuff. And I know, Andrea, it's probably like, overload. So again, you don't have to know all these things or solve all these problems and take care of them before your next board meeting. That's not going to happen. These are ideas and things that you can use as reference materials that you can look at specific times and have some conversations about. Another way you can learn more is if you Google stuff, you go to the Wyoming's public meeting laws. You probably have things in policy that already follow that. You can go to the WSBA website. That's the Wyoming School Board Association website. We have all kinds of links and things there, resources for board members across the state, new and old, veteran, experienced, unexperienced. There's a lot of data there. There's a National School Board Association that has tons of videos and speakers about all kinds of content. And so you can learn a lot about a lot of things by just going to the web and learning and picking up some information that might help you shaping your knowledge base when you work with your board. Also, knowing about meetings is pretty important. Quorum's a big deal. Making sure you advertise for the meetings that you have. Knowing what type of meetings you're dealing with. Like tonight, we're dealing in you guys call it workshop or work session? Or how do you reference this one?
I advertised it as a board training.
Board training. Okay. So there's different terminology, but basically you have regular board meetings, which you schedule in advance, and you have them once or twice a month. Then you can have special meetings when something comes up and you got a specific topic. Sometimes you have what's called emergency meetings, and sometimes you have work sessions or work trainings.
And in the period of 2 weeks, you will have had them all.
Yeah.
You will.
And there are
Special, a
requirements.
training and a regular.
Yeah, you will have them all. There are requirements that you have to follow to meet the open meeting laws, practices and law statutes of the state. And your administration and board know how to do that. Kelly has that responsibility, I think, with her staff to make sure those things happen. And remember that these meetings that you have are meetings that are held in the public. They're not necessarily public meetings. And by that, I don't mean to infer that the public can't attend. They can attend, but it's a meeting that you hold in the public. And most school districts allow an opportunity for public comment during those meetings. And as Carol mentioned, there's protocol to how that happens so that you can control that. So you don't go from a 2-hour meeting to a 7-hour meeting, because there's a lot of things people would like to discuss at times. But there are other ways to communicate with the public other than at a board meeting being held in the public. There's other ways you guys can communicate. So committees, those kinds of things. There's other ways to do it. This is one that I wasn't so sure. I don't put it in there to offend school districts or teams, but after I've done it with people, they say, "Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me." Sometimes it's hard to remember this stuff. But like when you're dealing with difficult situations, new challenges, big challenges, change of people, sometimes the pieces don't always fit. And so I always try to remind people. My mom used to tell me this. She said, "Rod, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So if you want to learn, guess what? Listen more than you speak." Now, I know I'm speaking a lot tonight because I'm your presenter, but when you're in the board setting, sometimes it's your turn to do your thing, and in your committee meetings and those things. And sometimes it's really valuable just to listen because of the information you can pick up from other people. And so people look at me like, "Rod, I share this because it's a good reminder, not because you guys don't follow these things." The second one up there talks about have an attitude of curiosity. Sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but some topics aren't as interesting to me as others. I'm human. And I try to go into those kind of meetings and conversations on that topic. I try to use a little bit of curiosity in the back of my brain, like, what is it I can take out of this that I didn't know before? What can I learn from this situation that might help me do my job better as a board member, i.e. our board then doing a better job for our kids and our patrons. And so going in with a little bit of curiosity sometimes, especially if you have that feeling up front, like, oh, I've already been through this 6 times. I don't want to talk about COVID, blah, blah, blah. There might be something there of value if you go in with looking for it. This probably does happen on all kinds of teams, businesses, families, school boards, city councils, all kinds of things. Sometimes you have to separate the ideas from the individual. So since we're in a human profession and we're all about people, we're different. That's okay. We should accept each other's differences as leaders and a part of a team. But sometimes you may disagree with somebody that has a different opinion than you. And when it's their turn to speak, sometimes it's hard to listen. And so what folks say you should do is listen for that one piece of information that may add some value and add some knowledge to something that you didn't know. You may even disagree with it, but it might give you enough information to better prepare you to ask a better question when it's your turn. So separate the content from the individual, listen for the content. The fourth is find common ground. The example that I used the other day, we were visiting about graduation. Could we all agree that a goal of graduation is important for our high school seniors as a board? I got a lot of heads nodding, right? Then if we want to get a little more specific, we could say, is it important that students who graduate have a wide variety of background in academics and other activities as they go through our system? Is it important for kids to have experiences in a variety of things? Yeah. Then if you wanted to get a little bit more specific, you might start to see some separation. Should we just continue with virtual learning and not do face-to-face ever again? I bet that would bring up some conversation, right? Or I think we need to spend less of our time in the basic core classes and more of our time in exploratories. I mean, you can see how common ground and things like that might be more difficult than the obvious things. And so when you're in a difficult discussion about something, for example, coming up with budgets and such, what could be a common ground area that you could probably all agree to? Well, how about what you control and what you don't control? Can we agree that we don't control the revenue source that comes into our organization? That might be a starting point. Can we control what information we choose to share with the public about our knowledge about revenue and budget? Whereas when you get a little bit deeper, you may find that those conversations get tougher. So find the common ground before you move on. And the fifth one is sometimes you just have to move on or revisit it as needed. I know at board meetings, sometimes the night can get long. And as you're working in a particular area, I don't know if it happens to you guys, but it's happened to me in board meetings. Sometimes there's a sidebar conversation or a topic. Somebody will bring something up that's of value and is knowledgeable, but it's not really one of our agenda items to decide that night. And we end up going off on a tangent on that area. Again, good information, but it may not be what's going to solve your problem for your agenda for that night. So sometimes you have to move on. And it takes a board chair or any board member, or even the soup, better if it comes from the board, that you acknowledge, hey, wait, you hold on. What's the term you guys use when you call to order or something like that? Do you ever do that?
Point of order?
Yeah, point of
Point of
order.
order.
Thank you. I knew there was a buzzword. I couldn't remember what it was. But to get people back on task, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. You just have an agenda you got to get through. Then sometimes you can revisit that issue, whatever it is, as needed. So if someone comes and has a complaint, just like you say, you acknowledge that, say, hey, yeah, Kelly will look into that and we'll get back to you. Sometimes you have to revisit issues down the road. Sometimes you just can't dress something up and make it right when it's not the right thing to be discussing at a board meeting. And so sometimes you just got to say no. That's not where we're going.
Well, and the letter that we were talking about at our special meeting Monday night is a perfect example of that. We had a letter, we looked at it, it didn't fit the entire board's needs, so we pulled it.
Absolutely.
And we're revisiting it next Monday night.
Great. Okay, I'm going to switch gears for a little bit. We've got about an hour left. We have been doing, I don't know if you guys attended our fall virtual conference that we had in November, but one of our speakers was David Horsaker. And David Horsaker is an expert in trust, in building trust in organizations and boards and those kind of things. And Brian Farmer and myself have both been doing some training. We're becoming students of the Trust Edge Corporation or group, not to work directly for them, but to value our role and what we do. And we work with school boards across the state of Wyoming. How can we help How can the research this guy's done make a difference and help us do our job? And what I'd like to do is have you, in your packet, I'm not going to go to it right now, but in your packet, you have a Harvard Business Review document that looks like this. I just want to reference it, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but basically what it was, the neuroscience of trust. Just know that there has been research done that says trust makes a difference. Would you buy that? And it sounds like some people would say trust is kind of a soft type of thing. It's not soft. Trust can be defined. It can be developed. It can be grown. It can be used to better whatever organization you're a part of. Would you buy that? Okay. Here's my thought for you. If you could think of, if you're comfortable sharing, think of a business and or a person, either or, of something you highly respect, like, use, reference to, admire, whatever the buzzword descriptors you want, either a business or an individual. Find that picture in your head of what that business is or who that person is, and then I want to ask you a couple of questions about that business or about that person. So find that person or that business in your head first that you highly admire, think is quality, you respect, you trust, you'd go back to, you'd believe in what they say and what they sell and what they do. Take a moment and see if you can find one. When you kind of nod your head, I'll know that you kind of have one. And trust me, the questions won't be that hard. I won't, it's not a quiz. Okay, so here's my question to you. As you have thought about what that business is or who that person is, very quickly, can you tell me one characteristic about that organization or that person that's of value to you, that you think is critically important, and why you admire that business or that person? Anyone?
You're truthful. Truthful.
Honesty, truthful.
Honesty, truthful.
Honesty and truthful, okay? That's a quality of character, yep. What else?
Approachable. Approachable.
Integrity.
Integrity, approachable, okay? What else?
Dedication.
Dedication, commitment, yeah? What else?
Transparent. and open.
Transparent, okay, cool.
Wise.
Wise, okay? So, guys, what you're describing in so many ways is what a trustworthy or trustful person or organization is. You're describing characteristics of what that is. So my question to you would be this: as a school board and as a district leadership team, do you believe there's any value in you being viewed as trustworthy to the students, staff, patrons? That's a yes, right?
Yeah.
How about to each other as a team member? Is it important for you to be trustworthy of your partners and your team members in this group? Okay. Well, if you would allow me, I'm going to have you go back to the main PowerPoint again, please. It's coming. No, you're cool. Okay, thank you. So just some statements that came out of the Horseacre training and things we've gathered. It says the lack of trust is your biggest expense. I would say that would be true just about anything. Look what happened to Boeing when they had that 737. Was it Boeing or Lockheed? I can't remember which one. They had a couple of major accidents. There's a lot of trust issues, and now just recently they've been trying to put that plane back in flight, and they have. And so those of you that have science and strong knowledge in that area, you know whether you probably have a better understanding of if it's been corrected or not. But the general public, we may or may not feel comfortable when you book a flight. Is it a 737? Was it a 737 MAX or whatever it was called? Not UMAX, but the other one. Another statement: without character, there's no trust. Without trust, there are no followers. Without followers, leadership does not exist. I don't care how hard you work as a leadership team. If you don't have followers and if you're not building trust with people, the decisions you make aren't going to go very far. They're not going to go very far out the door before people just ignore them and don't pay attention to them. In every interaction, we increase or decrease trust. Would you believe that? Some say it takes a lifetime to build that really good, solid trust, but you don't have a lifetime on this board unless you know, serve for 40 or 50 years or play superintendent for 40 or 50 years. You may not want to do that, but
God forbid.
yeah. But you can destroy trust pretty easy. It's harder to build. Some people would tell you that trust can't be built, but that study from the Harvard Business Review on neuroscience on trust, it says you can build trust. If you've destroyed it in a situation, you can rebuild it, but you have specific
long
things
time.
you have to do to make sure that happens. Okay. And the final thing, trust flows from individuals, not organizations. So you might wonder, well, Rod, why are you doing this Horseacre trust survey stuff with us? Because we're a team, but just not an individual. Well, it starts with you as an individual. So as an individual, if you practice the behaviors and start working on the skill areas of improving your ability to build trust, then that will magnify along with you as a team. And if your team can do that, then you can take that out to your general public and strengthen the trust that you have with others and they have with you. Back to my little presentation, please. So Horseacre came up with what he called the 8 pillars of trust. And what he basically did is he broke down a bunch of characteristics that you guys were just describing a little bit ago that you value or admire in a good business, and he put them into some category. And he calls them the 8 C's. And why they're 8 C's, I have no idea, but it's working for this guy. And the work that he does, he goes out, he works with Fortune 500 companies, he works with all kinds of boards and agencies across the world. But one of the things they talk about are 8 areas: clarity, compassion, character, competency, commitment, connection, contribution, and consistency. You guys described those in your definition a little bit ago about what you admire in a business or what you admire in an individual. We're going to come back and touch base on those in just a smidgen. Tonight, what I want to do is just give you an introduction to this whole thing about the Trust Edge. I'm going to have you go through and do a survey. Can you get me back to the main one? I'm going to have you go through and do David's survey. And for those of you that are at home watching and those that are here, you can write the numbers on a piece of paper if you'd like. But there's basically 24 questions, 12 on this page, 12 on the next. And there's a scale on top that says 1 equals never, 2 rarely, up to 5 always. What I'd like you to do is to take a few minutes and go through and do a self-survey with this statement in mind. My role as a board member, even a new board member, and or a superintendent, how am I doing related to these questions? So question number 1 would be, how often do I meet expectations when completing job responsibilities as a school board member? And give yourself a rating. Don't overthink it. And if you don't know, just leave it blank or guess. You have 2 pages here to do. There's 24. Then when you get to the end, I want to show you what you got to do. When you get to the end, there are the 8 pillars. They have the question number. Look back at the score you gave yourself and record your score under the appropriate question and pillar. Does that make sense? And you're going to tally your totals. So questions 7, 14, and 19, go look at those answers, write them down on the chart, and give me a total for that pillar. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes max to do this. So once you get that completed, then we're going to come back and chat. Long story being, I'm going to build this as a starting point for you and then share with you a couple strategies how you could utilize this to fine-tune your direction of where you're going and what you control as a board in relationship to attacking the issues you got to attack, the things you have to work on. So 10 minutes. If you got questions, yell at me. Let's,
I was
go-
just curious.
let's go ahead. Your Three Musketeers had a crunch to it. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got a couple crunchy ones.
Well, folks, that wasn't supposed to be a quiz or trick questions, but the application of this can be used in any environment. So, for example, you could see where you could utilize this if you wanted to evaluate your role as a parent, as a grandparent, a spouse, significant other. You could use it in your business, workplace. You can use it as your role as a school board member, as a superintendent. Horseacre uses this with all kinds of different companies and groups from all around the world. And the purpose of it is to be able to help you identify what those 8 pillars are and where you may have some strength for this role at this point in time. Because if you do this in more than one occasion, like many of these types of surveys, you're going to find that you may have some different strengths as things change. So just real quickly, show of hands or a grunt or a yell. Did anybody have a score in one of the 8 pillars of a 13 to a 15? Just raise your hand or say yay. You guys,
Yay.
yay. Okay, cool. Thank you. Did anybody have a score of 9 to 12 in any of the pillars?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Did anybody willing, able, brave enough to say that they had an 8 or lower in any particular area?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, one of the things that this is intended to do is to help you personally identify which pillars would be a strength of yours, of course, and which pillar or pillars might be an area you may want to learn more about. So I'm going to have these guys bring up the 8 Horseacre's 8 pillars, and I'll just kind of show you the quick descriptors of them and give you a little bit of an idea how you can use this to assist yourself personally before you work with the board on it. And these are his 8 pillars, just kind of broke out. And he says, trust is natural result of many tiny words, actions, thoughts, and intentions. It doesn't happen by accident. Gaining trust is work. It's earned over time. It doesn't happen quick. And there are key traits to how leaders build trust. Now, I use the term leaders when I talk about board members, because as an individual board member, you are a leader. You're an educational leader in your community serving on the Board of Education. And then as a group, you're a leadership team. But as an individual, you are a leader. You have a role as a leader in education in your community. One of the things that Horseacre talks about is that you have all these 8 pillars. And I like to start, there's no sequential order to why this one's first. It's just not one's more important than the other. They're all important, okay? Clarity. If you think about describing clarity, he uses some of his terminology. People trust the clear and mistrust the ambiguous. Would you agree with that? If you think about the whole issue you've dealt with in the last 7-8 months with COVID, do you think if you wouldn't have done all the work you would have done, where would the community and the staff be in their relationship to the COVID issue now? Would it be far worse, possibly? Yeah. So when you don't know something about somebody, or you're not clear what their intentions are, you're more apt not to line up behind them or to go to them, correct? And if it's clear, if the clarity's there, you're more willing to trust and go along with. For the trusted leader, clarity starts with honesty, honest communication. Communicators build trust. That's the whole part about a board member. If you don't know something, be honest. Say, I don't really know that. Or if it's not your responsibility, be honest with somebody and say, that's not what I do, but I can find the person, I can relay to the person who can help you with it. Communicate the purpose. Communication is a shared meaning. A clear vision unifies and motivates. One example that he shared that I thought was kind of hilarious, and I'd forgot about this, but back in '99, the importance of clarity. If you just hang with me a minute, I want to read something to you, and it makes his point really valid. Did you know in 1999, a very simple communication error cost NASA $125 million in the Mars orbiter? The problem, their contractor, a spacecraft team called Lockheed Martin, used the English measurement system while NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was using the metric system. So after 286 successful days in space and expectations for celebrating entering Mars orbit, both teams instead spent September 23rd investigating why their satellite sailed straight past its target. A lack of clarity can be very, very costly. So the point just being simple as this. I mentioned earlier about controlling what you control, unpacking what you can unpack, share, be transparent where you can. This whole thing about budget and what's happening. I really think school districts need to get their ducks in a row as far as what that message is that you want to send. And I really think we need to do a good job of educating our public about why it is where it is. I don't think it does us any good to point fingers and attack legislators, but I think it makes sense to share who owns what decisions and who owns what authority and what power to do what. Just like those patrons or that parent that corners you at the Ace Hardware and says, how come you don't fire that coach? Or how come you won't do this? There's certain things you don't have authority over, and there's certain things that you do. So this whole clarity issue, I think, is one area that we as schools should do a really good job of when it comes to dealing with this budget thing, like you did with what you're doing with COVID. I think school districts have gone above and beyond the call of duty with this COVID thing. I couldn't, thank goodness I'm retired. I don't know that I could do what Kelly does. I don't know that I could sit on a board right now and do what you guys have to do. I don't know that I could be in a classroom trying to be a teacher and worrying about whether my kids are going to come back to school the next day healthy or not. I don't know I can do that. So clarity is one of those, thanks guys, is one of those 8 commitment areas. So when you guys looked at your scores, how many of you had a pretty good score in the area of clarity? How many of you, that's an area that you might want to get a little better at? Okay, awesome. All right, cool. Thanks for being honest. Compassion, probably more than ever. Compassion becomes a pretty important pillar in your role that you're playing right now. People put faith in those who care beyond themselves. Your staff and your community know what your input is and what you're trying to do by what you do. They observe and by the things you say. They don't judge what you promise, they judge what you do. And so compassion is one of those that goes a long, long, long ways for many, many years. I spent a little time in Green River yesterday, and I ran into a couple of people that I used to work with. Hard to believe this, but I left Sweetwater County in 1996. That's 24, almost 25 years ago. And I still have people that I highly respect, admire, that were compassionate toward me and friendly and trusted in me. And there's people vice versa. And yesterday I had a couple of those conversations, which is kind of interesting. So compassion plays a huge role. Make relationships a priority. And I really believe on a school board, one of the roles that a school board has, according to key works of school boards across the country, you see lists of 10 things you should be doing or 8 things. We've kind of narrowed ours down to 5 off the NSBA, and we actually promote both. We promote 8 things, 8 key works and 5. But one of them is the school board superintendent relationship. That is one of the top goals that effective boards do in this country. And you can have it at a certain level, but it's never good enough. The journey continues. It's one of those you never reach the end. You got to keep working at it. And so I'd encourage you to keep working at your relationship skills, not only with each other, but with the people you serve and your stakeholders. Any which way you can, that helps build trust. Character. You guys described some good characters a little bit ago about people you admire, businesses you admiring. You got to ask yourself, is this the right thing? Just like this whole thing with the budget. I know many of us are so frustrated because we're dealing with COVID and everything else. That's like one more thing that you just can't stomach kind of thing. You have to get beyond that. You don't want to point fingers. You want to come up with a process and a strategy for how you want to share and grow and control what you can control. People judge that. Your staff will be judging you during this process. Come on, little bugger. Competency. Going back and making sure that what you're doing, you're staying fresh, you're relevant to what's happening. You guys are doing that. You're having a training tonight. Not that I'm giving you the world's wisdom, but I'm hoping that there might be 1 or 2 pieces of information that you take away from tonight that can help you do your job better, which ultimately will help serve kids and meet your goals. Commitment. Proven commitment is kind of important, but people that make the biggest impact we're willing to sacrifice for the greater good. You're going to put in an enormous amount of time and learning in the next few months to get through all the issues you have in front of you. But I will assure you, you'll get through them. You'll make the best decisions you can. And next year, there'll be another issue to put on the table to deal with. They don't stop coming, I believe, anyway. I don't think they stop coming. And as I get older, I realize sometimes they come faster, than you want. If you are committed to worthy causes, you'll go out of your way to help others. And I believe you guys really do want to be transparent and want to engage your stakeholders, make sure they have knowledge. I've heard that every time I've visited here. I've heard conversation about that. And I think you guys do a pretty good job of that already. Connection, just being genuine, being grateful, making sure you're engaging people at all levels. So when you start talking about budget, say for example, and you're going to start unpacking scenarios or gathering data on scenarios, don't forget your bus drivers. Don't forget your custodians. Don't forget food service. Don't forget all those other players. Don't forget those patrons. And even to some degree, maybe secondary students on certain occasions might be a target audience that you could learn some things from as well in sharing. Contribution. People immediately respond to results. I mean, if things are working and things are getting done and people can see that, they're going to come back to you. Give attention to resources, time, opportunity, and help. And probably really, really critical more than ever is reward results, no matter how small. They're big to the people that put the time and the effort into them. And I know you guys do this as a board. You honor people here at your board meetings on a fairly regular basis. Probably more than ever, we need to find ways for these people that are stressed to the max right now. What can be a meaningful way to acknowledge and share with them your appreciation for the things they're accomplishing? I mean, it can be as simple. One idea that I got the other day from a district was once a month now they're doing a barbecue with their bus drivers. Their bus drivers are having a Friday afternoon barbecue at lunchtime, and they invite the administration, the board members to come and sit in on it. Now, it doesn't seem like it's a really big thing, but they enjoy bringing their grills to their bus barn and cooking. It's a smaller district than you guys, but those kinds of things don't necessarily take a lot of money. They take time, and they take that contribution on your part, your time. You're giving time up to do that. But there's a value there that those people will have about you and that you can build with them. You can come up with a million different ideas how you do that. You don't have to go give out a bunch of awards and a bunch of money. Just giving a little bit of time and acknowledging and having general conversations sometimes will build that trust deeper than you can imagine. It's the little things. Consistency. I don't know about you guys, but when things are done on a consistent basis, people can expect that's what's going to happen. When the unexpected happens and it doesn't turn out well, that's when you start losing trust pretty quick. So how you choose to do business and share the good things that you're doing, continue with those consistent kind of behaviors. Little things make a difference. If you're going to change them, talk about why and where and the importance of it. Make sure people know it's coming. Okay. Can you take me back to the main PowerPoint one more time, please? So if you're considering a couple of things, if you're considering working on one of your pillars, just real quickly, I'll give you a couple of pointers on that. There's two things you can do. You guys are going to have things to work on far more than you have time. You got more issues to deal with. Just that's the business you're in. So one of the things you want to spend time doing is prioritizing which task, and I look at tasks in a couple of different levels. One would be, what's the importance of whatever that task is? And then evaluate what the importance is of the 3 or 4 major things you want to do. And then take a look at the urgency. So not only what the task is, the importance of the task, but the urgency of the task. So let's say the budget, let's say maybe thinking about delivery systems for education if this COVID continues. And I don't know, let's just go with those 2. Or maybe there's 3 or 4. And then you just say, okay, which is the most important if you can judge it, right? And then ask the question, which is more urgent? Which has to be done first? And that's a way of kind of sorting and selecting to help you prioritize which you're going to tackle first. Now, more than likely, you're going to tackle 3 or 4 things at one time because you can't just leave those other things alone, right? But go after the one that's important but more urgent. You apply some kind of scoring system. You like math, right, Andrea? So if you had 5 things and you ranked them 5 importance and ranked them 5 in urgency and you add up the total, what's the highest number? That's your number one thing you're going to work on, right? If you're taking care of your own trust building and you're looking at these different pillars, and a couple of you said clarity might be one for you. I just want to share a quick example of ways some people choose to use this. They'll take clarity, for example, and they'll look at the descriptors of clarity. We went by them once already, but they have those different descriptors of what clarity might be about. What Horsaker talks about is making it very simple and doable. So what happens is so many times when people try to set goals to improve and do things is they take something that's a little bit, it's a good goal, but it's pretty lofty and it's down there a ways. He highly recommends that you start with something a little bit smaller that you can take the steps on. And one of the things, listening to the different groups talk about this, here's some of the practices people do. And I'm talking about self-improvement, building your core strength on the pillars. Pick the pillar you want to work on, read through it real significantly so you see what the descriptors are and the buzzwords. And it's okay, this applies to what I want to get better at. And the first thing you do is you just write it down. You write it. What is it? You put it down in writing on your own. The second thing you do is you post it and you share it. In other words, you post it somewhere. Like if I put it on a sticky note, I want to do X, and I make it very specific. I post it somewhere in my room, on my computer screen. Maybe it's part of your, like when you do Twitter or do those kind of things, your picture comes up, and sometimes people have a little saying or whatever. However you want to do that, but you write it, you post it, and you share it with people that you care about and that care about you. So for example, if mine was, I wanted to, say I was working on clarity, I want to make sure that when I visit with school board chairs, that I'm really very, very clear about what I can do and what I can't do in my role as a trainer. Because sometimes people assume there's things I can and can't do. So I have to specifically write down what that one thing is that I want to do. Or maybe it's a type of communication I'm going to use. Write it, post it, share it with a couple of people that know me. Brian, maybe I share it with Carol, maybe I share it with somebody else. And then you got to evaluate it. You got to determine, am I doing this or am I not? And then celebrate it. It's pretty simple. Write it down, be specific, post it, put it in front of you so you see it on a regular basis. You can put it on a screensaver on your phone or whatever it is, but something you see. Share it with somebody so they can ask you questions about it, because that builds trust too. Evaluate whether you did or didn't do it. And this could be like over 2 weeks, 30 days, 10 days. Be specific about what it is you're going to do and how long you're going to take. And then celebrate when it's accomplished and then move on to another one. Now, there are more technical ways of getting into building your core areas in the pillars. But that was one recommendation that I saw a couple people share, and it kind of made sense. So I kind of played with it personally to see if it would work. And another one was, I found out a year ago that I'm very diabetic and I got a bunch of issues going on. It's been an ugly year of health and some other stuff happened. But what I realized was I said, I want to get healthier, but I didn't have a plan. So I had to write a plan down about what I was going to be willing to eat and what I wouldn't eat. Well, that was part of the plan. But what I realized was I can't say no to people. So when people offer me a piece of coffee cake, so really I was zeroing in specifically what the issue was that was the biggest problem for me. And it was that I couldn't say no to people because I was afraid I was going to offend them. So like when I go into an office and they have coffee cake and they're going to offer it to me, I wasn't selective enough in my deciding what I wanted to get better at. I was too generic, too general. Get really tight on what that one area is that you want to get better at, and then evaluate it and see if you're really doing it or not. It goes back to evidence and all those kind of things. His goal is simply this, that you start small and do the little things. And if you do the little things in those pillars, they start to grow and become habits for you. Now, where can you use this as a school board? Well, if you work on this as an individual, we can provide you a little more training to help grow this area for you. You can do it on your own by researching and reading as well. You move it from an individual to a team as a school board. So if you were to go back and score that survey, your point of view about the whole board, how would the whole board score? Would it score different than you did as an individual in their relationship to how you're getting the job done to those questions that were asked? I don't know the answer. You guys can think about that. But as a whole team, you can become focused on which pillars you want to get stronger at as an organization. How do you want to improve in your area of clarity as a school board? How do you want to improve in your area of connectedness? How do you want to improve in your area of character? You can actually single out and identify collectively one or two things that you might want to work on, be very specific about it, and put it in play. And then give it time, because it just doesn't happen, in a month, from one month to the next. So guys, this is the quick and dirty of the Trust Edge. That's kind of the basic premise behind it. Knowing that these pillars, if you live them, they make a difference. And obviously, if you grow trust, you grow all the successes that go along with it. Your risks, your difficult decisions are conversations you can have in the public because people trust that what you're doing is right and justified. And you're consistent in what you do, and you're thoughtful, and you communicate, you're compassionate, you do all those things. You can do that as a group and grow yourself, especially when times are difficult. In fact, that's the best time to do it because the emotions are probably the highest they've ever been. I think they are right now. I could be wrong, but I think they're pretty high. Okay, so let's see where we are. Our time's getting to the end. Can you take me back to the main PowerPoint? Yep, thank you. So from this, you can do this as a board if you so choose down the road. You can get some guidance with it if you want, and then you can build from it. Okay. Earlier, I asked a question about how you identify the things you want to work on. This is another way you can piggyback into using the pillars if you so choose. These first two questions are pretty easy. This is a good way to engage people that if you sit with a different group of people and you find out what they like about your district and what they think a kid should walk out of here with. Now, let's look at the 6 strength areas and weakness or areas of growth. Coming back to teaching and learning. If you're looking at areas you want to work on and check out, you have right here teaching and learning, which includes curriculum, instruction, assessment, interventions, et cetera, et cetera. You should be able to identify a couple of strengths that you have in that area as an organization, and hopefully you could identify a couple of areas you could grow and get better at as an organization. Same would be true in communication. That's one that I heard you guys talk about earlier. I would, maybe communication's one you want to take and you come back and say, all right, how are we doing internally? How are we doing externally? How are we doing with our patrons? How are we doing with our staff? How do we communicate with each other? How effective are we? How effective are we between the board and the administration? What are our strengths? What are our areas of growth? Be specific about what it is you want to tackle and go after. Operations is another area. Student activities programs, culture, and governance. Those are all areas. I talked about them earlier when you're trying to identify things you want to work on. I can't imagine that you guys would be stuck trying to find something to work on because you've identified a ton of good things already. But if you want to zero in a particular area and build from it, these are areas that you can zero in on and build from. Back to the key works of school districts. Here's the 5 that research says effective, truly effective, and strong boards that have most success and extraordinary results. Spend time on these 5 things. And you guys have talked about these on more than one occasion tonight in different ways. Visioning for the district. What is it? Where are you going to go? What you're going to work on? What's the most important thing? Accountability process. You put in some governance policies. That's the next one on policies. What are you going to put in play to hold yourself accountable, hold the organization accountable for getting better? Remember, if you don't like policies, who makes them?
We do.
You do. You can change them. You can delete them. You can get rid of them. Promote community leadership. How do you promote community leadership? You follow those 8 pillars. You do the things that you need to do to build that relationship with your community, including your staff, each other, your staff, and the patrons out there. And then cultivate a positive board superintendent relationship. So key work of school boards in the country, those are 5 of the top things that effective boards do. And so what I would challenge you is this. Even though you got all these issues out there to deal with, always remember these 5 things in the back of your mind. Are we trying to do these things on a regular basis? And I think with the things you're working on, you are. I don't think it's a far reach at all. I think those are things you guys are trying to do. I've seen evidence of it. And then Lencioni does this piece. I've shared this with you before. I'm not going to go through them all, but he says teams sometimes get dysfunctional and don't work. Every team goes through this at one point or another. The key is to recognize it, call on it, correct it, and move forward. He's got 5 areas: trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and intention to results. I'm going to slip through these quick because I don't want to spend time on those. Here's one other document that you guys can choose to look at down the road if you want. It's about running your board meetings and having information become more effective. It's questions you can ask each other about the soup's role, the board's role, and your individual role about how to make your board meetings more productive. Okay, I'm going to get close to closing here. You got living your commitments. Do these things, life will be better. I promise me they will if you spend your time on the things you can control. Processing the process, I won't do that with you tonight, but I'd encourage you when you do all these meetings, these work sessions and trainings and everything that you do, stop at the end of the meeting, give yourself 10 minutes to reflect. What was the aha or the, the good thing that happened? What did I learn? What did I take away from this activity we just did? 2, what could we do different next time for improvement? How can we make this learning opportunity better for all of us? And then probably the most important one, I think, is what could I do as an individual personally to make my role as a board member in whatever activity, engagement you're involved in, what can I do personally to make it better? And if you practice doing that, it'll become routine for you. And your diabetes will get better. Just telling you, it is. You just got to start where you are as an individual. Could you take me to the steps, please? That last document. Thank you. So in closing for you tonight, Andrea, thank you for being on the board and dedicating your time to this crazy time in the world. And for you other board members that re-upped and came back on, thank you for what you're doing. I think your challenges are out there in front of you. I think you know what they are. I don't think you need to go find them. I don't think you need to create any new ones. I think you have plenty to work on. But I think how you choose to unpack, share, and plan to address those things, I think what you get to control. And what I want to remind you of, because sometimes it's too hard. I'm not in the forest with you. I'm kind of on the edge looking, so I can kind of see what people are dealing with and what they're doing from one board to the next. And the best advice I can give you is, go with your heart, go with your passion, because if you do that, you're most of the time you're right, and you're going to do what's best for yourself and for people and for the organization. But when you think about smaller steps, this illustration was shared with me by Kelly Hornby about a week or so ago, and it was absolutely perfect to some of the issues that I've been helping and trying to work with school boards on, is that if you do what's on the left and you clearly define and come to agreement and have that partnership, expecting what they expect from each other, and you're doing what you need to do, you take the small steps knowing where you're going, the chances of getting there are far better, in my opinion, than trying to bite off too much, attacking too many issues, or maybe not using the right methods and getting there, and you find that you don't get off the ground at all. But you could be working really, really hard at it and feel really exhausted. So consciously try to figure out a way, how do we move from the right to the left in all the issues that you know what the issues are, and in many cases you have suggestions for what the answers might be. Maybe you don't quite got the answers yet, but take small steps and work toward it. Practice some of the things that are in here. Don't take everything for granted. You don't have to do it all. Pick 1 or 2 things that can help you work toward the challenges that you have in front of you. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care. And for Max and George, the same thing. You wouldn't be on the board if you didn't care. So that part's not an issue. You don't do it for the money. So if you don't do it for the money, and I know you care, you must be doing it for some reason that's really important. So work with that. You're doing it because you care about kids, you care about people. Relationships, at the end of the day, is really the only thing in life that really makes a big difference anyway. So unpack yourself with your team, with your people, find ways to get where you're going, care enough to be honest with each other, care enough to confront each other. Don't beat each other up. Be patient with your public, be patient with your staff, be understanding of the things they're going through. They don't know if they have a job next year. You don't know if they don't have a job next year. Be honest with them. So with that, I want to thank you, and I'm more than willing, once you guys process and think about your next steps, visit with me, and if I can help you with something virtually or whatever, and pinpoint and work through one thing with you at a deeper level, I'd be more than happy to do that for you. Any questions, thoughts, parting shots, concerns?
Thank you for coming, Rod. Appreciate your expertise and your willingness to spend some time with us. And we will be back in touch with, in the next 6 weeks or a couple of months or something like that. And I think we're going to look at a couple of virtual sessions
Okay.
as we kind of determine what direction we're going and where we see
Okay.
maybe some more assistance with where we're headed.
And sometimes just another set of eyes. And like I said, you're not in an isolated world here, folks. Every school district I'm working with right now, and I have like 13 I'm doing like in about a 2-week period or 3-week period. Every school district is in the almost exact same boat you are, dealing with the very same issues and having this very same stress and the very same concerns. So you're not alone, but use what you got that you have. You have a lot of really caring, good people, and you have great ideas. You know what to do. You just got to be patient and positive, and you're the model. People are looking at you guys holding things together. So just be tough and go home and cry privately, and then come back and go to work. Roll your sleeves up and do your thing. That's what you get to do. So thank you for all your work. And again, somewhere in there, all my contact information's in there. If you need to email or call or text or whatever, anytime, and we'll be glad to help you with what we can. So thank you, guys. Thanks, Max and George. Thanks for being there tonight.
Thanks, George and Max, for making
Thank you.
making it.
Thank you for giving us the ability to,
Have a
make
good
like a
night,
Mazda
y'all.
and you can bring in.
All righty. That's it.
All right, y'all have a good night.